Picture a garment, just one, a simple linen shirt, the colour of old cream, the colour of watered-down milk left standing in a cup. It weighs almost nothing when you first put it on. The fabric is rough in the places where the weave pulls tight, and it smells of the last time someone washed it, which was a while ago but not long enough to matter yet. It sits flat against your collarbones when you stand. It bunches at your waist when you bend. When the wind cuts across an open field, you can feel it move against your ribs like a second skin. Now imagine you've been wearing that shirt for 3 days without taking it off, then 7, then 14. Then imagine you've been wearing it for 30 days straight, through sleeping and sweating and working in the sun and sleeping again, through rain that soaked it to your skin and dried it board stiff overnight, through every meal, every mile, every night you've curled into whatever corner of whatever barn or ditch or filthy inn floor you could find, through July heat that turned your back into a salt marsh and August nights cold enough to make your teeth ache. Imagine what's living in that shirt now. Not metaphorically, literally. What has moved in? What has made a home there? Built a colony in the seams? Begun to feed on you the way you feed on everything else? We're going back to medieval England tonight. Not to the castles you've seen in films. Not to the knights in polished armour with their speeches about honour. Not to the great halls with the roasted boars and the embroidered banners, and the women with their tall hen-inns. We're going to the body underneath all of that. The ordinary body, the working body. The body that got rained on and sunburned and never had enough to eat, that walked 15 miles a day on roads that were mostly suggestion, that owned exactly one shirt and was wearing it right now. This is the story of what that shirt cost you. Not in money, in something worse. I make these history stories and I honestly cannot tell whether any of you are actually sleeping to them, or whether you're all just lying very still in the dark while I describe medieval parasite ecology in loving detail. Either way, subscribe if you haven't, get comfortable, preferably not anywhere itchy. Here we go. The itch comes before anything else. It doesn't knock, it doesn't announce itself. It simply arrives, sometime around day 11 or 12, in that precise strip of skin between your shoulder blades where your hand cannot reach no matter how you contort yourself. A small thing at first, a whisper of a thing. You roll your shoulder inside the shirt and the linen shifts against your skin, and for a moment it stops and you forget about it. But it doesn't stop. It moves. That is the first thing you need to understand about what happens when you wear the same shirt for a month in the summer of the year 1372 in rural England. The itch is not one thing. It is not a rash, not the rough woven linen against tired skin, not the dried sweat of 3 days hardening into salt crystals against your back. It is all of those things. But it is also something else, something with legs. Your name is Thomas Ware. You're 19 years old. You are a journeyman carpenter from a village called Aldwick, which is nowhere and everywhere in Sussex, a small cluster of thatch and mud, and one shared well a few miles from the coast, and you left it 6 weeks ago with your tools tied in canvas on your back, and your best shirt on your body, and the practical hope that somewhere between the coast and London, someone would need a carpenter enough to pay him. The shirt was clean when you left. Your mother washed it in the river 2 days before you went. She beat it against the flat stone the women of the village used for this purpose, a stone worn smooth over generations of exactly this work, and she held it up against the sky and looked through it for holes the way you might look at a candle through your hand, and finding none. She spread it on the fence in the July sun until it dried stiff and smelling of nothing but light and the faint green mineral smell of the river. and something that might have been the last soap she'd used on it, which was made from wood ash and pig fat and had been sitting in a clay pot on the shelf above the fire since the previous winter. She pressed it flat with her palms. She handed it to you folded. "Keep it clean," she said. You meant to. You really did mean to. The road from Aldwych to London goes north and then roughly east, and then north again, and covers something close to 60 miles as the crow flies. And you're not a crow, which means the road you actually travel adds another 15 miles of detour for rivers and hills and stretches of forest, where the path disappears entirely for half a morning before reconvening on the other side of a muddy field. You've been walking for 6 weeks, and you still aren't there. This is partly because you've stopped in 3 villages along the way to take small jobs. A door hung here, a fence repaired there, one afternoon spent helping a mill owner splice a cracked beam that was causing the whole upper floor to list at an angle that made his wife refuse to go upstairs. The mill job paid you 4 pence. 4 pence is not enough to buy a new shirt. A new shirt, if you were to buy one at a market, would cost you somewhere between 12 and 16 pence for the plainest, roughest linen, the kind that scratches, the kind with uneven weave and a hem that frays within the month, the good kind, the kind with a fine even cloth and proper stitching and seams that sit flat against the skin without rubbing, the kind your mother made for you after saving the money for 2 years and cutting the cloth herself on the kitchen table and stitching it by firelight through 2 winters. That kind costs more than you will earn in a week. You have 1 shirt. This is not unusual. Most people your age, your background, your trade, have 1 shirt. Some people have 2, but the second is the one they wash while they wear the first, and if you're travelling alone without a fire and a line and 2 days to let something dry, the second shirt is mostly theoretical. It lives in the bundle on your back and comes out for Sundays and Saints' days, and the rare occasion when someone important needs to believe you are not the kind of person who smells like this. But here is the thing about a shirt when you're walking 60 miles in the height of summer. The shirt touches your body everywhere. It touches your shoulders and your back and your chest and your stomach and the insides of your arms, where the skin is soft. Every drop of sweat that leaves your body, and you produce astonishing quantities of sweat, because you are walking uphill with 40 pounds of tools, and it is July in England, which means the weather alternates without warning between blazing sun and sideways rain. Every drop of sweat goes into the shirt, into the fabric, into the weave. The shirt absorbs it the way bread absorbs broth. It sits there, it dries into a faint white ring, a tide mark of salt, and then you sweat again, and it absorbs that too. By day 4, the shirt smells. By day 7, the shirt is stiff in places where the dried sweat has concentrated, along the collar and across the back between your shoulders, and in a horizontal strip around your waist where the fabric bunches when you walk. By day 10, the shirt smells the way a damp dog smells, the way a stable smells in summer, the way a human body smells when it has been working hard and sleeping rough and eating mostly whatever can be found or bought for a penny, and occasionally nothing at all. You don't notice. That's the important thing. You're inside the smell. You live in it. It is not something you perceive anymore. The way you don't hear the sound of your own heartbeat, the way you don't feel the weight of your own head on your neck. The shirt is just the shirt. You put it on when you dress in the morning, if you've taken it off to sleep, and you forget about it until you don't. Other people notice. But we'll get to that. On day 11, walking through a stretch of beech forest somewhere north of Chichester, the itch arrives. It starts between your shoulder blades. You reach back and scratch it through the linen and feel momentary relief and keep walking. An hour later it's moved, or a new one has joined it, lower on your back near your spine. You scratch that one too. By the time you clear the forest and come out into open farmland with the smell of cut hay, riding the afternoon wind and a village visible on the rise ahead, there are 3 separate itches happening simultaneously across your back, and you have begun to walk slightly awkwardly, twisting your shoulders in a way that makes the linen move against your skin in a poor substitute for scratching. You are not imagining it. You have acquired passengers, pediculus humanis corporis. That is their name, though you will never in your life hear that name or any name like it. You will call them lice if you call them anything at all. You might call them vermin. The educated men of your era, the monks and physicians, call them the affliction of the poor, the punishment of unclean living, the judgment of God upon those who lack the discipline to maintain proper bodily order. The sermon you heard last Easter mentioned them in a list that included sloth and carelessness and failure to wash as manifestations of spiritual neglect. The priest did not mean to be cruel. He was simply repeating what everyone believed. But you have not been slothful. You have been walking 60 miles in July with your tools on your back. You have been sleeping in barns because you cannot afford inns. You have eaten whatever a penny could buy and gone to sleep hungry on the nights when a penny was more than you had. You have worked hard and tried to be honest and kept your mother's face in your mind when the road was bad and the weather worse. And you have lice. Here is the thing about body lice that distinguishes them from the head lice you probably had as a child, and that most people have at some point, and that are merely unpleasant rather than dangerous. Body lice. The kind that live in clothing, in the seams, in the stitching, in the double-layered hem. Body lice are not just an inconvenience. They are not just embarrassing. They carry something. They carry it in their bodies, in their gut flora, in the feces they leave behind on your skin as they feed, and then retreat back into the fabric. They carry typhus. You don't know this. Nobody in England in 1372 knows this. The connection between lice and the specific fever that kills thousands of people in camps and prisons and among the travelling poor won't be established for another 500 years. What people in your world know is that the poor get sick, and the poor have lice, and the poor get sick more when they have more lice, and that there seems to be some relationship between filth and fever that moral philosophy can explain well enough. What they don't know is the mechanism, the specific Rickettsia prowazekii bacterium that lives in the louse's gut and gets deposited in its feces on your skin and enters your bloodstream through the tiny abrasions caused by scratching. What they don't know is that the itch itself is the delivery mechanism, that every time you reach back and scratch that spot between your shoulder blades, you are rubbing louse feces into the scratches, that you're infecting yourself with your own fingernails. You scratch again, walking up the hill toward the village. The hay smells sweet. The evening light is low and golden across the stubble fields. Somewhere ahead, a dog is barking at something and then stops. You can hear the sound of a hammer, somebody still working, and you orient toward it the way a needle orients toward north. The village is called Haslemere. You know this because there's a man sitting on a log outside the first building, which appears to be a barn being extended. And when you come close enough to speak without shouting, you ask, "Haslemere," he says, looking at you. He's a broad man, maybe 40, with a face that has spent a great deal of time in weather. His hands are wrapped around a cup of something, and he is resting from whatever work he was doing. He looks you over, the way a man looks you over when you appear on the road, with tools on your back and your shirt showing the history of every mile you've walked in it. His gaze stops on the shirt. It lingers there for just a moment, a flicker, barely anything, the kind of assessment that takes less than a second and leaves no trace on the face. Carpenter, he asks. Joiner, you say, which is technically more accurate. You work with finer wood, finer joinery, the stuff of interior work rather than rough structural timber. But out here on the road, the distinction matters less than the fact of the tools. He considers this. We've got a man, he says, local man, not looking for another. This is the first refusal of the trip that has nothing obviously to do with the shirt, or not obviously, but you will think about the way his eyes moved over you and stopped and moved on, and you will think about it again in the coming days when you understand better what he saw, or thought he saw, what the shirt was saying on your behalf without your permission. You sleep in the field that night, not because you have no money, you still have 3 pence, but because the inn is full, they say, which might even be true. The hay is dry and the night is warm and you've slept in worse places. You roll your bundle under your head and look up at the sky, which is clear tonight and full of stars that have no names in any language you speak, and you reach back and scratch your shoulder blades against the ground slowly, with the specific relief that comes from friction applied in exactly the right place. The relief lasts about 40 seconds. Then the itch moves. Now let me tell you about the shirt. Not just this shirt, but the shirt in general, in the England of 1372, because understanding what a shirt was, what it meant, what it cost, what it represented, is necessary for understanding what it means to have only one, and to be wearing it right now on the road in July with everything that is living in its seams. A linen shirt in the 14th century is the innermost layer of clothing, the layer that touches skin, the layer that absorbs what the body produces and protects the outer garments, the wool tunic, the coat, the cloak, from being constantly soaked in sweat and body oil, and all the other things the human body continuously generates. The shirt is a filter, a buffer. It sits between you and the world and takes the abuse so the more expensive things don't have to. Linen comes from the flax plant. You grow flax, wet it in water until it rots just enough to separate the fibres, beat and comb the fibres, spin them, and weave the resulting thread into cloth. This process takes months. The cloth itself, even the rough kind, even the kind your shirt is made from, requires skilled labour at multiple stages. The spinning, the weaving, the finishing, and skilled labour costs money, and the money accumulates through the supply chain until the finished cloth arrives at a market, and a woman like your mother looks at it and calculates what she can afford and cuts accordingly. Your shirt took your mother 2 winters to afford. She bought the cloth at the autumn market in Chichester. She cut it on the kitchen table, working by eye because she had no pattern other than the one she carried in her head from making shirts for your father and for your brother before you. She cut the body pieces and the sleeves and the collar and the gussets that go under the arms, small diamond-shaped pieces of cloth that allow the arms to move without tearing the seams. And she stitched it all together with linen thread using stitches so small, and even they would embarrass most professional tailors. She reinforced the collar with a double layer. She hemmed the bottom in a rolled hem that would not ravel even after years of washing. She spent 4 evenings on it. She handed it to you folded. Keep it clean. This shirt is worth roughly a week of your wages on a good week. It is worth more than your shoes. It is worth considerably more than your belt or your cap or the wool tunic that goes over it. It is not, in the grand scheme of medieval material culture, a particularly fine thing. It is not silk, it is not bleached white, it is not embroidered, but it is yours, and it is well made, and it fits, and it was made with care by someone who loves you. It is also, as of day 11 on the road to London, home to somewhere between 50 and several hundred body lice, depending on which part of the colonisation process you are in. Body lice live in clothing, not in hair, not directly on skin. That is the head louse, a different creature with different habits. The body louse uses your skin the way a farmer uses a field. It comes to feed, leaves its business behind, returns to the seams of your shirt to lay its eggs and wait. The eggs, nits, are glued to the fibres of the fabric with a biological adhesive that is genuinely difficult to remove without either boiling the cloth or physically pulling each egg off individually with a fine-toothed comb. The eggs are tiny, the size of a grain of pepper, white or translucent, practically invisible against linen unless you know what you're looking for and hold the cloth up to a good light. The lice themselves, fully grown, are about 2 millimeters long, the size of a sesame seed. They have 6 legs and a flattened body, and a specific colouring, greyish-white, transparent enough that if you look closely you can sometimes see a dark spot where they've recently fed, your own blood visible through their bodies. They move quickly when disturbed. They are not graceful creatures. They scramble. In the seams of your shirt as you sleep in the hay in the field outside Haslemere, there are eggs, dozens of them, cemented to the fibres along the inner seam of the left shoulder, along the double-stitched collar, in the gusset under the right arm where the fabric is warmest and most protected from light. The eggs were laid over the past week. By the time they hatch, which takes 7 to 10 days at body temperature, each one will become a nymph, which will feed 3 times before it becomes an adult, which will then begin laying its own eggs within 10 days of reaching maturity. The mathematics of this, if left unchecked, are alarming. You are asleep. The hay is soft and dry and smells of summer. The stars move overhead. The dog in the village has stopped barking. Somewhere nearby, a small animal moves through the hedge with a dry rustling sound, pauses, moves on. In the seams of your shirt, things that have been eggs since 3 days ago begin to stir. Morning. You wake before the birds, which means you wake in the grey pre-dawn when the sky is the colour of pewter, and the air is cold enough that your breath shows and the dew has soaked through the hay, into your blanket and through your blanket into the back of your tunic. You sit up. Your back aches from the ground. Your mouth tastes of the previous night's nothing. Your hair is matted on one side where you slept on it. You reach back and scratch your shoulder blades. The itch is worse than yesterday. You scratch it thoroughly with conviction, and then you scratch the sides and the lower back and one spot near your right hip that has joined the general itching consensus overnight, and you sit there in the grey morning doing this for a while, and then you stand up and shake the hay out of your blanket and roll it back into its bundle, and check that your tools are all there, and lace up your shoes and eat the last of the bread you bought 2 days ago, which is dry but still edible, and you start walking north. The road is mud dried into ruts from the last rain, which was 4 days ago, and your shoes find every rut and tip you slightly with each step, so the walk has a lurching quality that you've stopped noticing. The sky turns pink and then pale blue. Birds start. A cart passes you going south, the man driving it acknowledging your presence with a slight lift of the chin that is the traveller's greeting. I see you. I note you're not obviously dangerous. Good day. You scratch your back again, awkwardly, reaching up under the tunic with one hand while holding the bundle with the other, trying to get at the spot that the linen covers but doesn't relieve. By the time you reach the next town, a larger place, a market town, you can tell by the number of roads converging, by the way buildings grow closer together as you approach. The itch has become a presence, not constant, not yet, not the roaring, sustained itch that will come later, but present, like a word on the tip of your tongue, like a sound just at the edge of hearing. The market town is Farnham. You know this because there's a sign, an actual painted sign hung above the entrance to the main street, which is unusual enough that you stop and look at it. Someone has maintained it recently. The letters are clear. This is the kind of town that takes its own existence seriously, that has a market cross in the centre and a church with a stone tower and at least 3 inns and a bathhouse, which you note as you walk through because you have been thinking about a bathhouse for approximately a week. A bathhouse in 1372 England is not a complicated or exclusively aristocratic institution. It is a business. You pay your penny, you get a tub of hot water, you get as long as you like in it, and there is usually soap available for an additional small sum. The bathtub itself is wooden, barrel-stave construction, and is shared, not at the same time as other people, but between customers, refilled with hot water carried in buckets from the fire. The water is not always clean by the time it reaches you. There are things floating in it you choose not to examine, but it is hot, and it is privacy, and it is hot. You stand outside the bathhouse and calculate you have 3 pence. The bathhouse is a penny for the bath, another halfpenny for soap. Call it a penny and a half. You need at least a penny for food today. You have 3 pence total. You have exactly enough. You go in. The bathhouse is run by a woman of about 50 who has the permanently reddened face of someone who spends their days adjacent to steam. She takes your penny and a half without ceremony, points you to a back room, and tells you the water will be ready in a few minutes. You sit on a bench and wait. The room smells strongly of steam and wood smoke and the sulphurous ghost of something the previous customer must have washed off. The walls are damp. The plank floor is dark with moisture that has never entirely dried. The tub is maybe waist deep, maybe 3 feet across. The water, when she pours it in, is hot enough that you have to lower yourself in stages, ankle, then knee, then hip, hissing through your teeth. She leaves you to it. You take the shirt off for the first time in 11 days. There is a specific sensation to this that is hard to describe accurately. The shirt has been against your skin for so long, through so much, that taking it off feels less like undressing and more like peeling. Not painfully, not exactly, but with a strange intimacy, a resistance, as though the shirt has opinions about being removed. The places where it was sweat-dried stiff pull slightly at the skin as you lift it over your head. The collar, which has been against your neck for 11 days, leaves a faint line of redness on your neck that you can feel with your fingers even before you see it. You drop the shirt on the bench. You lower yourself into the hot water up to your shoulders. Oh, the relief of this is not a small thing. It moves through you like a sound. Every muscle that has been braced against the cold of sleeping rough releases at once, or almost at once, and you sit in the hot water with your eyes closed and feel the heat soak into your back and your shoulders and the backs of your thighs, where the road has been put in miles into your bones, and for a few minutes nothing else matters at all. Then you open your eyes. The water around you is changing colour, not dramatically, not like a scene from a nightmare, but slowly, through the steam, the clear water is taking on a faint brownish yellow tone, the specific colour of 6 weeks of road and work and summer heat. You look at your arms above the waterline. The skin of your forearms is brown from the sun and rough from working with wood and marked with small white scars from various close calls with chisels and saws. But on the inner arm, where the shirt has covered it, the skin is different. There are marks there, small red marks raised slightly in a scattered pattern across the bicep and the inner elbow, and along the side of the rib cage where you can see them now in the bathhouse's small high window light. You look at them. You run your finger across them. They don't hurt, but they don't exactly feel like nothing either. You look at the shirt on the bench. You pick it up and you hold it up toward the light from the window, and you look at the inner seam of the left shoulder, the way your mother used to look at newly woven cloth before buying it, looking through the cloth for flaws. You're looking for something else, and you find it. Not immediately, not the first place you look, but in the collar, where the double layer of linen creates a protected inner fold. You find what you were half expecting and half hoping you wouldn't find. They are very small, smaller than you expected, moving quickly when the light hits them, retreating into the fold of cloth, disappearing back into the darkness of the seam. Lice. You say a word your mother would have had opinions about. You put the shirt back down on the bench. You sink back into the water up to your chin. You close your eyes. You're 19 years old, a good carpenter's son from a clean house, who left home 6 weeks ago with his mother's best work on his back, and the reasonable hope that the world was navigable if you were willing to work hard enough at navigating it, and you have lice. This is humiliating in a way that requires a moment of sitting in hot water to process. The humiliation is not irrational. In 1372, England, body lice are understood as a sign of something, not exactly a moral failing, not exactly a disease, but something in between, a condition of the very poor, the very slovenly, the homeless and the desperate, the beggars and the prisoners and the pilgrims who've been walking the roads long enough that their bodies have stopped being entirely their own. You know this the way you know all the unspoken rules of your world, not from being taught it directly, but from absorbing it through 1,000 small observations, through the way your mother talked about certain people in the village, through the wide berth given to the travelling beggar who came through Aldwick 2 summers ago, with patches on his patches and a smell that preceded him by 10 yards. You have lice. This means something. This means you are the man other men give a wide berth to. The man with the cup outside the barn in Haslemere, the one who looked at your shirt and said they already had a carpenter. Was that what he was reading? Did your shirt tell him something you didn't know it was saying? You sit in the water and think about this, and the water is cooling now. The heat you were grateful for dissipating by degrees, and the steam has thinned, and you can feel the marks on your arms and rib cage with a new clarity, with new information behind them, and the itch between your shoulder blades is still there, the water offering only a temporary respite because the water is not where the problem lives. The problem lives in the shirt on the bench, in its seams, in its folds, in the collar your mother double-stitched by firelight 2 winters ago. You get out of the tub. You stand dripping on the plank floor. You pick up the shirt and you look at it for a long time. Here is the problem laid out plainly. You cannot not wear the shirt. You own one shirt. You are on the road in the middle of England. The money you have will not buy you a new one. You have roughly 4 pence left after the bath, and you need to eat and you need to keep walking, and the shirt is the shirt. You wear it, or you wear nothing under your tunic, which is wool, which will scratch your skin raw within a day, and absorbs sweat and stink in ways that will make the current situation look like an improvement. You cannot boil the shirt here in the bathhouse. You could ask, perhaps, but boiling would require a large pot and a fire and perhaps an hour, and the woman running this establishment is not running a laundry. You could wash it in the tub before you get out, but washing in slightly dirty bath water is not the same as boiling, and boiling is what's required to kill the eggs. Then it's cemented to the fibres that simple washing will not dislodge. You could try to pick them out individually. This takes hours and requires good light and good eyes and a fine-toothed comb you don't own. And even if you were thorough, which you couldn't be, you would miss eggs in the seams where the fabric folds double and the light doesn't reach. You could throw the shirt away and walk without one. This is not seriously an option, but you think about it briefly with the specific dark humour of someone in a bad situation. You put the shirt back on. This is what it feels like. You know what's in there now. You put it on anyway because there is no other choice, and the shirt settles back against your skin with its familiar weight and its particular combination of rough spots and soft spots, and the stiff patches around the collar and the waist that are entirely your own sweat history mapped in linen, and the lice in the seams are invisible. You cannot feel them individually, but you know they're there, and this knowledge changes everything about how the shirt feels. It feels like wearing a decision you can't undo. You lace your tunic over it. You put your bundle back on your back. You nod to the woman at the front, who nods back without looking up from whatever she's mending, and you step back out into Farnham and its market day bustle, and the smell of the street after the smell of steam and wood ash. The market in Farnham is a real market, a Wednesday market with perhaps 200 people moving through it, which makes it large by your experience. Stalls down the middle of the main street selling cloth and leather goods and food and household tools and live animals in pens, and dead animals hanging from hooks and cheese and dried fish and candles and pottery and the 10,000 small necessaries of life in a rural English town. You walk through it with professional purpose, because a man with tools on his back who walks through a market looking uncertain looks desperate, and desperate-looking men do not get hired. You look for the signs of building work, fresh timber, raw earth, the smell of lime mortar, and you find it at the far end of the market where a large house is being extended, a new wing going up behind the existing structure, the framing already done and the carpenters now working on the roof line. You approach the master carpenter, a heavy-set man with sawdust in his hair and the permanently assessing gaze of someone who hires and fires men for a living. Journeymen, you say, looking for work. Joiner's training, but I'll timber frame if needed. He looks at you. He looks at your tools. He looks at your tools more carefully than he looks at you, which is the right order of priorities. A man's tools tell you more about his skill than his face does. He picks up one of your chisels and turns it in his hands, looking at the edge. Good steel, he says. My father's, you say. He nods, puts the chisel back, and then his gaze moves as the other man's gaze moved to the shirt, to the collar specifically, visible above the neckline of your tunic. And something moves across his face that is very small and very quick and leaves no trace. Not hiring today, he says. He turns back to his work. You stand there for a moment. I'm a good worker, you say. I'm not asking for much. 4p a day, room if you have it. I'll do the detail work, the fitting work, whatever needs precision. He doesn't turn around. Not hiring, he says again, and his tone has changed slightly, has acquired the particular quality of a final answer, and you know it. and you pick up your bundle and you walk back through the market and out the other end of town, and you keep walking north. The collar. He looked at the collar. You think about what he saw. You've been on the road for 6 weeks. Your face is brown and stubbled. You've been shaving when you can, with a small knife that does the job technically but not elegantly. Your hands are calloused and scarred in the pattern of your trade, which is honest. Your tools are good steel, Sheffield. Your father's before yours and his father's before that. These things all speak well. But the collar is telling a different story. A shirt collar in 1372 is the most visible evidence of how a man maintains himself. The collar turns outward over the tunic's neckline. It is the part of the shirt that the world sees, and a good shirt collar is white, or close to white, or at least the colour of clean linen, which is off-white, a warm cream. It is this colour when it leaves the laundress's hands after a proper wash. It stays this colour for perhaps a week of careful wearing. Your collar is the colour of old wood, tan almost, the accumulated brown of 6 weeks of neck sweat and road dust. The collar that your mother double-stitched with such care is telling everyone you meet that you are a man who has not changed his shirt or had it laundered in a long time, which in 1372 England carries the same information it carries in any era. This man is either very poor or very indifferent, or both. He has no one to do his washing. He has no home to wash it in. He's travelling light in the way that only people with no choice travel light. He is the kind of man who has lice. He might be the kind of man who has worse things than lice. And in 1372, England, in the 2 decades following the Black Death, the plague that killed between 1/3 and 1/2 of the entire population of Europe in the 1340s, and that returns in smaller waves in 1361 and 1369, each wave smaller than the last but still terrifying. In this world, a man who looks like he might be carrying something, anything, who looks like the living might already be sliding toward the dying, is a man you do not let near your building site. You do not hire him. You do not let him sleep in your barn. You do not share your table. The plague taught England to be afraid of the body, of what the body can carry without knowing it carries anything, of what the body can pass on in a handshake, in a breath, in the invisible transfer of whatever it is. No one knows what it is. The miasma theory says it's bad air. The religious theory says it's God's judgment. The terrified practical theory says it's something that moves between bodies, and you prevent its movement by preventing contact of whatever it is that moves from the sick to the well. A man with a dirty collar is not a plague carrier, but he looks like one. He looks like the early stages of something. He looks like the wrong choice. You keep walking north. The itch moves across your back. You scratch it. You scratch your ribs. You scratch the spot near your right hip that has been there for 3 days now and no longer seems to want to leave. You eat the food you bought in the market with your last 2 pence. Bread and a hard-boiled egg and a piece of cheese the size of your fist, sitting on a stone wall outside Farnham with the late afternoon sun warming the top of your head. You eat methodically, without hurry, because when you're not sure where the next food is coming from, eating slowly is a form of respect. The bread is good. The cheese is good. The egg is overcooked and slightly green at the yolk, but you eat it completely. You have no money. You have lice. You have London, approximately 30 miles away, which might as well be 30 miles away on the moon. You have your tools, which are good, and you have the shirt, which is trying to make you unemployable. What you need urgently in the immediate practical sense, is work. work that pays, work that keeps you fed long enough to earn enough to either buy a new shirt or find somewhere to wash this one properly. These things are linked in a way that is difficult to escape. You need work to get money to fix the shirt, but the shirt is preventing you from getting work to get money. This is the trap. Not unique to you, not unique to 1372. The same trap has caught people in every century before yours and will catch people in every century after. The specific poverty loop in which the thing you need to stop being poor costs money you don't have because you're poor. You sit on the wall and think about this with your eyes on the road and your hands folded in your lap. Here is what you know about lice from actual experience, as opposed to the moral panic discourse. Your sister had them once when she was about 10. Head lice, not body lice, but lice. Your mother spent an entire evening with a knit comb, a comb with very fine teeth specifically made for this purpose, found in most households. Going through your sister's hair section by section, in good candlelight, picking the eggs out individually where the comb missed them. She washed your sister's hair in a decoction of wormwood, which is the herbal treatment your mother knew for lice. Wormwood boiled in water, cooled to tolerability, applied to the hair. The smell is extraordinary, simultaneously astringent and bitter, like something between vinegar and medicine. She then picked through the hair again in daylight to catch what she'd missed. It took 3 treatments over 2 weeks before the lice were fully gone. 3 treatments and a great deal of patience. You have no wormwood. You have no knit comb. You have no second shirt to wear while boiling this one. You have no fire large enough to boil a shirt even if you had a pot, which you don't. You get off the wall and keep walking. Night is coming. The light is going the way English summer light goes, slowly and with a kind of reluctance. The sky staying bright long after the sun has dropped below the western horizon. You need shelter. The air is still warm, but there is the smell of rain in it somewhere, an approaching metallic edge underlying the smell of hay and hedgerow, and sleeping wet is something you've done enough times now to know you'd prefer not to do it again. The farm you find is set back from the road a 1/4 mile, visible by its smoke and then by the shape of its buildings against the darkening sky. A farmstead of reasonable size, thatch and timber, a main house and a barn and some outbuildings, a garden with late summer vegetables, 2 dogs that bark at you from behind a fence, and then subside when they've established that they've barked and you've heard them. A farmer comes to the door, older, grey-haired, the kind of man who has worked outside his entire life so that his body has taken on the proportions of someone who is both stocky and lean at once. You ask for barn space for the night. You have no money, you say, but you can work for it in the morning, whatever needs doing before the road. A couple of hours of whatever he needs. He looks at you for a moment. His gaze does what gauges have been doing all week. Down to the shirt, to the collar. He's too far away in the evening light to see the marks on your skin. Too far to see what's in the seams, but the collar is visible. "My barn's full," he says. "Sorry." The barn, visible behind him, makes no sound at all. "I'm a carpenter," you say. "Good tools. I'll fix anything that needs fixing in the morning." He shakes his head. Not unkindly exactly, but firmly. You walk back to the road. The rain, when it comes an hour later, is not heavy, but it is persistent. It falls from a sky that has closed completely over the stars, fine and cold and relentless. The kind of rain that doesn't assault but simply accumulates, and you find the overhang of a large oak and huddle under it with your blanket over your shoulders and your bundle under your feet to keep it dry. And the rain falls and falls, and you sit there in the dark with the smell of wet earth, and the sound of rain on oak leaves, and the persistent travelling companion of the itch, now joined by the specific chill discomfort of damp clothing. This is the first moment sitting under the oak tree in the dark in the rain with no money and no prospects for tomorrow that you allow yourself to think about what the shirt is actually costing you. Not the shirt itself. The shirt is a garment. The shirt is innocent of everything except being the shirt. What's costing you is the visible evidence that you are a man alone on the road, in summer in a shirt he hasn't changed. That is what people are reading. That is what the man outside the barn in Haslemere read. That is what the master carpenter in Farnham read. That is what the farmer just read. They are not reading lice. They cannot see lice. The shirt gives up no lice to casual inspection. They are reading the collar, the stiffness, the colour, the particular way a shirt looks when it has been lived in rather than worn. They are reading, this man has nothing. This man is the wrong side of some invisible line between the man who is making his way and the man who has stopped making his way. This man might have what you don't want your barn or your building site or your family to have. In the morning, you will start the day with nothing. No money, no food, a shirt that is quietly working against you, and approximately 30 miles between you and London. You will need to earn something today or go hungry again. And to earn something, you need someone to hire you. And to hire you, they need to be able to look at you and see a man worth hiring, and what they are currently seeing is not that. You shift under the oak. The bark is rough against your back, and the roughness is welcome because it means you don't have to use your fingers, which are cold, and you press your back against the bark and drag yourself slowly up and down against it like a bear against a tree, and close your eyes and breathe out slowly. The itch responds to this with something that might be relief or might be contempt. Morning is grey and damp. The rain has stopped, but the world is wet. The road is slick. Your blanket is damp at the edges where the oak failed to cover it, and your boots are wet through, and the shirt against your skin has the specific unpleasant quality of cloth that is neither truly wet nor truly dry, but exists in a middle state that combines the disadvantages of both. You wring out the corners of your blanket. You shake out your bundle. You eat nothing because there is nothing to eat and start walking. 2 miles down the road, you come across a situation. It is a cart, a 2-wheel cart with a horse, stopped at an angle across the road, one wheel in the ditch at a bad angle. The horse standing with the particular patient resignation of horses who have been in worse situations. The driver is standing in the road looking at the wheel with his arms folded. He is perhaps 35, well dressed for a man on the road. A good wool coat, clean shirt visible at the collar, boots that suggest he's not accustomed to walking if he doesn't have to. He sees you coming and does not wave you away. Wheels come off the axle, he says as you approach. Split pin sheared. I've got a spare pin, but I can't lift the axle and fit it at the same time. You look at the wheel. You look at the axle. He's right. It's a simple fix mechanically. The kind of thing that takes 5 minutes if you have 2 pairs of hands and a little knowledge of how carts work. I can help, you say. He looks at you. This is the look, down to the shirt. But he is in a ditch, metaphorically speaking, and his options are limited, and the look is shorter than usual and more practical. Good, he says. What follows is the simplest transaction of the trip. You brace the axle while he fits the pin, and then you both heave the wheel back onto the hub, and he hammers the pin home with a stone from the road, because neither of you has a hammer handy, which is mildly undignified but effective. The whole thing takes perhaps 15 minutes. The horse watches this with mild interest and then returns its attention to the wet grass at the edge of the road. The man dusts his hands and looks at you. "I'm heading to Guildford," he says. "Ride, if you want." You want. You ride in the back of the cart, your bundle between your feet, the cart rocking on the road's ruts, the horse moving at the comfortable ambling trot of a horse that is neither hurrying nor dawdling. The man, his name is William. He's a wool merchant. He's been to a market in the south and is heading home to his family in Guildford. Talks occasionally, not excessively, the way people talk when they're relieved to have company after something went wrong and they need to account for their day to themselves as much as to another person. He does not look at your shirt. He has already looked at your shirt and made his calculation and found it acceptable, or acceptable enough. He needed help, and you helped him. That is the full economy of this particular exchange. You sit in the cart and feel the miles passing under you instead of through you, which is a significant improvement. The morning sun is coming out, the grey burning off, and the road dries as you watch. The cart passes through a village where the smell of morning baking drifts out of a bakehouse window and makes your stomach fold in on itself with want. William notices. "When did you last eat?" he asks, not accusingly, simply as a fact-finding exercise. "Yesterday afternoon, you say?" He reaches behind him into a leather sack and produces bread and a piece of dried meat, the kind of salt-preserved pork that keeps indefinitely and tastes like the memory of pork rather than the thing itself, and he hands it back to you without ceremony and says nothing more about it. You eat it slowly and carefully, which is both gratitude and habit, and you watch the English countryside go by. They're 3 days out from London now if you walk the rest of it. Maybe 2 if you can get another cart ride or 2. The farms are larger here, more prosperous looking, the fields better maintained. The towns are closer together. The road is better surfaced, with laid stone in places rather than just packed earth. You can feel the gravitational pull of the city, the way the whole landscape organises itself slightly differently when you're in the orbit of a very large thing. London in 1372 has somewhere between 40 and 60,000 people, depending on how you count and what year it is. The Black Death dropped it from perhaps 80,000 in the 1340s, and it has been climbing back since. It is smaller than Paris, smaller than Florence, smaller than Constantinople or Cairo, but for you, from Aldwick in Sussex, it is the largest human thing in the world, and you have been walking toward it for 6 weeks on a letter of introduction from the parish priest to a master carpenter in Suffolk named Roger Tanner, who allegedly builds well and pays honestly and takes good apprentices. And if the letter still holds, and if Roger Tanner is still in business, and if you can get there before the letter's value expires by its age, you have a chance. But you have to get there not smelling like what you currently smell like. You have to get there with a collar that is not the colour of a road. You have to get there looking like a man who is making his way, not a man who's been made the wrong way. This brings you back to the shirt. The problem of the shirt is not just the aesthetics of the collar. It is not just the social reading. There is a physical dimension to it that has been developing quietly over the past week, and that is now in the daylight on the back of William the wool merchant's cart, making itself impossible to ignore. Let me describe what is actually happening on your skin. Not as metaphor, as biology. The louse bites to feed. It extends its mouth parts, tubular, precise, designed for exactly this purpose, and punctures the skin and draws blood. The bite itself you don't feel, or barely feel, because the louse injects a small quantity of saliva that contains an anticoagulant to keep the blood flowing, and, incidentally, a mild anaesthetic that reduces the pain of the bite. What you feel instead is the reaction to the bite, an immune response, the skin swelling slightly, the redness, the fierce and specific itch that follows the bite by several hours. This is the source of the marks on your arms and on your torso, the marks that looked like scattered red spots in the bathhouse light. Each mark is a feeding site, each site itches, and each time you scratch, which you cannot help doing, the itch is not the kind of itch you can simply decide not to scratch. You introduce bacteria from under your fingernails into the broken skin. Minor infections. Small, usually. The kind that makes the skin red and slightly warm and occasionally forms a small raised centre that you don't want to look at too closely. But that is not the worst of it. The louse, having fed, retreats to the seam of your shirt. It digests. It deposits feces on the fabric near the seam. Tiny dark specks that you would see if you knew to look for them and had good enough light. These feces contain the rickettsia bacterium, and when the feces dry and crumble and the crumbs fall onto your skin, and when you scratch, there it is, the mechanism, the way this disease enters the body, not through the bite, through the scratch. You scratch your ribs, sitting on the back of William the Merchant's cart in the English countryside, and the sun is warm on your face and the road is passing beneath you, and you feel nothing out of the ordinary. This is how it starts. Not a dramatic moment, not a sign or a warning. Just a man scratching his ribs on a cart, which is such an ordinary thing, such a background noise thing, that neither of you marks it as the beginning of anything. It is just a man who has an itch that he scratches. It is just a shirt on a road in July in 1372. Guildford appears in the middle of the morning, a proper town on the River Wey, with a castle on the hill and a high street that slopes steeply down from the castle to the river crossing. William drops you at the bridge with a handshake and a wish of good luck, and before he drives away he reaches back into his sack and finds another piece of bread and drops it in your hands, and you watch his cart creak up the high street and round a corner and disappear. You stand on the bridge and look down at the river. The water is clean here, clearer than the rivers you've crossed further south. The river runs fast over a shallow stony bed, pale stones visible through the green-brown water, and the sound of it is constant, a low, rushing sound beneath the sound of the town. You need 3 things: work, money, and a solution to the shirt. You have currently none of these things. You have bread, and you eat it standing on the bridge, looking at the water, and you think about what you're going to do. Here is what you know. You know that somewhere in Guildford, on a market day like today, there will be a laundress or a washerwoman who takes in pieces for payment. You know that boiling a shirt costs less than a penny. You have seen this done, you know the transaction, and that a properly boiled shirt, dried and aired, kills whatever is living in it. You know this is the practical solution. You know that you currently have nothing. What you need is to earn a penny before anything else can happen. 1 penny, the smallest denomination that constitutes actual money in this economy. 1 penny, and you can eat and get the shirt seen to. With a clean shirt, your chances of earning more improve substantially. You look at the market stalls on the high street above the bridge. You look at your tools. You have a plan. It is not a complicated plan. It is a carpenter's plan. Find something broken and fix it before anyone else does, and then present the result and see if someone will pay for it. This works best on market days when people are present in numbers and there are goods on display that are supported by makeshift stands and tables that have a tendency, under load and with the wear of the morning, to develop wobbles and instabilities that make the goods on them unsafe. You walk up the high street. The third stall has a table that is listing noticeably to the left. The stall holder, a woman selling cloth of various kinds, bolts of wool and linen arranged in a fan behind her, has her attention on a customer and hasn't noticed yet, or has noticed and is prioritizing the sale over the wobble. One of the table's back legs has worked itself loose from the crossbrace at the bottom. You can see it clearly, the gap that has opened between the leg and the brace, the table putting all its weight on the diagonal rather than vertical. You put your bundle down. You take out the chisel that is also, functionally, your primary wedge and pry tool in informal situations. You crouch down behind the table, quietly, without ceremony, and in 30 seconds you've tightened the joint using a thin wedge of wastewood you always carry for exactly this kind of improvised repair, tapped home with the handle of the chisel. The table stops listing. You stand up. The woman with the cloth notices you at the moment of standing. Table was going, you say. Back left leg. I've wedged it, but you need a proper repair at the end of the day, otherwise it'll go again. She looks at you. She looks at the table. She tests it with her hands. It is solid now, level. She reaches into her apron and gives you a halfpenny without a word. You move to the next stall. By noon you have 2 pennies, a halfpenny, and the grateful address of a wheelwright on the street behind the market, who has a workbench that is splitting along the long grain and needs a butterfly key cut and fitted before it gets worse. He will pay you 4p tomorrow morning when you come back to do it. He shakes your hand on it. You have money. You ask at the market about a laundress. They direct you to a woman at the lower end of the street close to the river. She has a fire and a pot, and she takes in pieces for washing, though the turnaround is a day minimum, usually 2. A day minimum. You explain your situation. You have 1 shirt. It needs boiling. You need it back by evening. She looks at you with the comprehensive gaze of a woman who has seen every kind of person who comes in off the road. Extra penny for the rush, she says. You give her 2 of your pennies and your shirt and go to sit on the river bank in your tunic alone, which is a strange sensation. The wool ruff against your shoulders without the linen between you and it, and you scratch your back against a tree trunk and wait. And for the first time in 2 weeks you sit somewhere in the sun without the shirt against your skin, and the itch recedes slightly, not entirely but slightly, like a sound turned down a few degrees. The laundress works fast when paid to work fast. She puts the shirt in her pot with lye soap and brings it to a full rolling boil and keeps it there for 40 minutes, poking it down with a stick, and then she pulls it out with the stick and dunks it in the river water to rinse it and spreads it flat on the riverbank grass in the afternoon sun to dry. You sit nearby and watch it. While it dries, she does something you haven't asked her to do and don't expect. She runs a seam ripper along the inside collar seam, the double-stitched one, and opens it an inch and turns it up to the light and shows you what's inside. Look, she says, you look. The inner face of the double-stitching, the hidden surface that your mother's needle created but that no one has seen since the day it was stitched, is speckled with tiny dark marks, fecal matter, louse dirt, the accumulated evidence of whatever was living in there, preserved in the fold of the seam where the boiling water reached last. You see, she says. I see, you say. Take a nail when you get where you're going, she says, and unpick these seams, every seam that's doubled, clean them out and restitch them, otherwise they'll be back in a month. She says this matter-of-factly, not with the contempt you expected or the wariness, She says it the way she'd tell you a roof needed repointing, as a fact about the maintenance of a thing. How many people come through with this, you ask? She gives you a look that contains an entire education. Half the people who come through here with packs on their backs and 2 weeks of a road on their faces, she says. All the soldiers, most of the pilgrims, half the journeymen. She pauses. The other half have either already dealt with it or haven't been out long enough. She spreads the shirt more evenly in the sun with her hands. It's not shame, she says. It's the road. The road does it to everyone eventually. You sit with this for a moment. The road does it to everyone eventually. You think about the man outside the barn in Haslemere who sent you away with his barn allegedly full. You think about the master carpenter in Farnham who said not hiring. You think about the farmer in the rain who said my barn's full. They were reading the collar. They were reading the road. But they were not wrong exactly. They were reading something real. The shirt was telling the truth about your situation. You'd been on the road for weeks and you had a problem, and the problem was real, even if the shame they attached to it belonged to them as not to you. The shirt dries in the afternoon sun. It dries slowly. The collar lasts because it's the thickest. You watch the steam rising off it and then diminishing, and then the shirt lying flat and still on the grass in the sun, and when the laundress presses it between her palms and pronounces it dry, you put it on. This is what that feels like. It feels like the opposite of the bathhouse shirt. It feels like cloth that has been through fire and water and come out clean. It smells of nothing, or almost nothing. A faint ghost of lye soap, something slightly mineral from the river water, and underneath both of those the smell of clean fabric, of linen that is just linen again, just the thing your mother made, without the weeks of accumulated chemistry that had buried it. It sits differently against your skin. You notice this immediately. Lighter, cleaner. The stiffness is gone. The lye has stripped out the dried sweat deposits that were hardening along the collar and waist. The fabric is supple in a way it hasn't been for weeks. You lift the collar and look at it. It is, if not white, at least the colour of proper linen again, not the road brown that it had become. Your face, in the river's surface below you, looks like a face that belongs to a man in a clean shirt. You walk up the Guildford High Street in the late afternoon and your walk is different. You carry yourself differently. You have not solved every problem. You still have no money for tomorrow's food. You still have 30 miles to London. You still have the wheelwright's work tomorrow morning and a night to get through before then. But you are walking up the street in a clean shirt, and people are not doing the thing with their eyes and your collar that has been happening all week. The innkeeper, when you ask about stabling in the barn, says yes. He says yes. 4 pence. He says it slowly, watching your face for the calculation. You tell him you have the wheelwright's job in the morning, and you'll pay him 4 pence then. He looks at you for a long moment. He looks at your tools. He looks at your shirt. First thing in the morning, he says. First thing, you say. You sleep that night in the inn's barn on clean hay, not in a field under a tree, and the shirt against your skin is clean, and the itch between your shoulder blades is not gone. It'll take more than one washing to undo what's been done to the skin. The marks will fade over several days, and the specific immune response irritation will quiet. But it is reduced to a more manageable register, a reminder rather than a presence. You close your eyes. You think about 30 miles. You think about Roger Tanner in Suffolk. You think about your mother handing you the shirt, folded, pressed flat. Keep it clean. You did not keep it clean exactly. You couldn't. The road made it impossible. but you're learning on the road the specific economy of cleanliness, that it is not a luxury, that it is not a character judgment, that it is a practical necessity in a world where what you look like and what you smell like and what your collar tells people before you say a single word determines whether you eat tomorrow. The shirt taught you this. The shirt and the laundress on the riverbank who opened the seam and showed you what was inside. In the morning you do the wheelwright's job quickly and well. The butterfly key you cut fits perfectly on the first try, which is the kind of thing that happens when you are good at what you do and have been doing it since you were old enough to hold a chisel. He pays you 4p. You pay the innkeeper. You buy bread and dried fish from the market with the change. You start walking north. 3 more days, the shirt clean. The itch fades to memory over those 3 days, though not entirely. The marks on your skin take a week to disappear, and in the mornings they remind you of their existence with a ghost of the itch that had them. But it is manageable. It is the memory of a problem rather than the problem itself. On the 3rd day, in the late afternoon, you come over a rise and see for the first time the Thames Valley laid out below you. The river a silver-grey glint through the haze of distance, and further south and east than you expect. The smudge of smoke that is London. You stand there on the rise with your bundle on your back and your tools in it, and the shirt clean under your tunic, and you look at that smudge on the sky, and you feel something that takes a moment to identify. You feel like yourself. The person who left Aldwych 6 weeks ago with a letter in his pocket and his mother's shirt on his back, and the reasonable hope that work waited somewhere up the road. That person is still there. The road hasn't taken him yet. The smudge grows as you walk toward it, gains detail, the shapes of spires appearing one by one above the horizon as the road drops toward the river. The sound of the city reaching you before you can see it clearly. A low continuous noise, not quite a roar, more like the sound of weather, of something large and constant and alive. You walk down toward it. But before London, before Southwark and Roger Tanner and whatever comes after, there is one more thing the road needs to teach you. You have been saved in Guildford by a laundress and halfpenny's worth of boiling water and a day's sun on a riverbank. The shirt is clean. The lice are gone, or nearly gone. The ones that were in the seams killed by the boiling, the eggs destroyed, the colony broken up. You're carrying nothing dangerous in your shirt right now, but you've also been walking for 3 days since then. 3 days in which the shirt has been absorbing road and summer heat, and the sweat of someone who has 30 miles left to walk, and a great deal on his mind. And if you look at the collar now, in the late afternoon light, if you look honestly at the collar, it is already beginning to show the slight warmth of colour that is the early sign of what it will become. The road is long. The shirt is one shirt. The question is not whether this will happen again, but when, and how you will deal with it when it does. You know how to deal with it now. That is the difference. 6 weeks ago you left Aldwych with your mother's shirt and no idea what wearing it for a month would do to you, and to your prospects, and to the small invisible world living in its seams. Now you know. Now you know about laundresses and boiling water and open seam cleaning and the specific cost of not doing these things, which turns out to be not measured in pennies, but in work refused, and barns that are suddenly full, and the accumulating weight of being read as wrong by everyone you meet. You know what the collar tells people. You know what's living in it when you don't. And you know, this is the part that matters, the part you will carry with you into London and into your years as a journeyman, and eventually, if things go well, into the years after that. You know that the people who refused you the work and the barn and the benefit of the doubt were not entirely wrong. Not right either. The shirt was not a moral statement. It was a practical failure. A maintenance failure. The failure of a 19-year-old alone on the road to understand that the body requires tending the way a tool requires tending, regularly, before the damage shows, not after. Your father taught you about chisels. A good edge needs regular attention. You don't wait until the chisel is too dull to cut before you sharpen it. You sharpen it before you notice it's dull. You sharpen it on a schedule, as a discipline, as a habit of someone who respects the tool and the work it does. The shirt is the same. The body is the same. You are tired in the way that people are tired when they've been carrying something heavy for a long time, and they are almost at the place they were carrying it to. Your legs hurt. Your back hurts. The bundle is no heavier than it was when you started, but it feels heavier, which is the math of accumulated miles. The road curves south along the river toward the bridge. You can see London Bridge from here. The famous bridge with the buildings on it. The thing you've heard described your whole life and never seen and are now seeing for the first time, and it looks exactly like what it is. Something built by humans past the point of reason, past the point of sensible engineering, built until it became something else, something that says something about the people who built it that they couldn't say any other way. You stop and look at it for a long moment. Then you keep walking. The smell of London reaches you before the sound does, or rather, the smell confirms the sound, adds a physical dimension to what was previously just noise. It is extraordinary. The smell of London in 1372. It is not one smell but 50, layered and shifting. The river itself, which smells of mud and salt and something vegetative at low tide. The smell of a body of water that is also a working highway, and a place where people empty their waste and fish for food and wash things and float things and drown things and drag things up out of the mud. Over the river, the smell of coal smoke from 1,000 hearths, the particular acrid sweet smell of sea coal burning in city fireplaces, which makes the London air heavy and slightly yellow on cold days. Less so today in the fading summer heat, but still present, layered into everything, and under both of those the baseline smell of a medieval city, the smell of people, of animals, horses and pigs and dogs and chickens and the occasional cow being walked to the butcher, of dung in the street which everyone produces and no one removes fast enough, of tanneries and butchers and cook shops and breweries and bakers, of rot and refuse and the specific chemistry of a few tens of thousands of people living in close proximity and doing their best. This is the smell of London. You take a breath of it. You cross the bridge. The bridge is a world. You knew it would be. Everyone who's been here has told you. The bridge has shops on it, houses on it, a chapel on it, people who are born on it and die on it, and have never in their lives set foot on either bank. But knowing it and walking it are different things. The road narrows between the buildings on either side, narrows until in some places you can touch both buildings with outstretched arms, and the noise under the bridge tunnel reflected off stone and wood is like being inside a machine, like being inside the body of the city, which in some sense you are. The river is visible through gaps between buildings where they haven't yet been fully filled. You stop at one of these gaps and look down. The water is fast here, funneled through the bridge piers, moving with the specific urgency of water that has been constrained, and you understand suddenly why people drown on this crossing, why the watermen won't shoot the bridge arches except at precise moments of the tide. The water below is not the calm river you saw upstream, but something different, something with its own opinions about direction. You watch it for a moment, then you walk on into Southwark, which is on the south bank, which is where Roger Tanner's workshop allegedly is, and which is where your letter of introduction is addressed to, and which is, you have been told, both the best and worst place to arrive in London if you are a young journeyman with a good trade and no connections. The best because the South Bank is where the building work is. London is growing, recovering from the plague years, filling back in and expanding, and the craftsmen who build it tend to cluster on the South Bank where rents are lower, and regulations from the city guilds are slightly less strangling. Roger Tanner, if your priest description is accurate, is one of the better master carpenters in Southwark, known for quality work on the churches and merchant houses going up on both sides of the river. The worst, because the South Bank is where London puts the things it doesn't want to look at directly. The bear-baiting arenas, the brothels, the theatres, the inns that cater to pilgrims coming up from the south and give them one last night of whatever they're looking for before the city's more formal face demands propriety. The worst inns on the South Bank will relieve a naive traveller of everything they own before they've finished their first cup of ale. You know this. You are not naive. You are 19 and tired, and your shirt is not quite clean, and you have a letter in your pocket and the address of a workshop and the approximately 4p left from the wheelwright job, after the inn and the food, which is enough to find Roger Tanner and not much else. You find the workshop by sound and smell before you find it by sight. The sound of adze on timber, the smell of fresh-cut oak, the sweet, resinous smell of wood being worked that is one of the best smells in the world if you're someone who works with wood, which you are. It is a double-fronted building, wider than deep, with timber frames visible in the yard beside it, and stacks of seasoning lumber along the wall and 3 men working in the yard, 2 with adzes and 1 fitting a mortise by eye with a mallet and chisel. At the back of the yard, directing something with a hand gesture, is a man of about 50, who has the build of someone who spent his first 30 years doing hard physical work, and his next 20 thinking hard about how to do it better. You ask the nearest worker if this is Tanner's workshop. He says it is. You walk over to the man of 50. He turns before you get to him. He looks at you. The full inventory of you. Tools, face, hands, age, posture, the state of the shirt visible at the collar. The shirt. The collar. You watch his eyes do what eyes have been doing on this road for weeks. The collar is not what it was in Guildford. It is 3 days past the laundress. It is the colour of off-white, not quite the clean linen colour, but close. The marks are faint. The road is there, in the fabric, as the road always is, but not as a declaration, as a reality. He looks at the collar. He looks back at your face. He extends his hand. Roger Tanner, he says. You take his hand. Thomas Ware, you say. I have a letter. He takes the letter and reads it, which takes a moment because the priest's handwriting is the handwriting of a man who writes rarely and carefully, each letter formed with effort. Roger Tanner's lips move slightly as he reads. When he finishes, he folds the letter and looks at you over the top of it. Can you work? He says. Yes, you say. Good enough answer, he says. Come back in the morning. I'll give you 3 days to show me what you've got. If you're as good as this letter says, we'll talk about a position. I've got a house going up on the Strand that needs finished carpentry. He turns away. Then he turns back. There's a bathhouse on the corner of the next street, he says. Penny for the bath, halfpenny for soap. He says it without accusation, without particular emphasis. A practical piece of information, worth doing before the morning. He turns away again and goes back to his yard. You stand there for a moment. The evening light is warm on the south bank. The smell of the Thames at low tide, the smell of the city, the smell of cut oak from the yard behind you. Somewhere nearby, a church bell is ringing for the evening office. You have arrived. You put your hand up and touch the collar of your shirt, the collar your mother stitched by firelight, the collar that has told the story of 6 weeks, of road to every pair of eyes that looked at it, and that told it again just now to Roger Tanner, who read it and decided it was acceptable. Almost acceptable, worth a bath and a halfpenny of soap before the morning. You laugh. It comes out of you unexpectedly, a short sound, not entirely happy, but not unhappy either. Something in between. The laugh of someone who has been on the road long enough to find the gap between what they intended and what happened genuinely funny rather than catastrophic. You pick up your bundle, you go find the bathhouse. The water, when it comes, is hot. You lower yourself in by stages, ankle and knee and hip and shoulder, and the heat moves through the tired miles of you. And you take the bar of soap the woman hands you, and you wash the shirt while you're in the water, the way you should have done that first time in Guildford, kneading the soap into the collar and the seams and the gussets, and the water turns the colour it always turns, that particular warmth of accumulated road, and you drain it and refill it with clean water and rinse, and then you climb out and spread the shirt on the bench and look at it. Clean, or close to clean as it can be tonight. You put it on damp because it is July still and the night is warm enough, and by the time you find a place to sleep on the south bank in a decent inn stable, with the 4 pence that remain, you will pay for it properly. 4 pence is enough for stable space in a south bank inn. By the time you're lying on your back in clean straw, with the shirt drying against your skin in the warm air, you will be thinking about the morning. 3 days to show Roger Tanner what you can do. 3 days and a chance. The shirt will dry by morning. In the morning you will lift the collar and look at it, and it will be the colour of clean linen, or near enough, and you will walk into Roger Tanner's yard and you will pick up your chisel and you will do the work that you came 60 miles to do. And for the first time since you left Aldwick, the shirt will not be the first thing anyone sees. Your trade will be. That is what you walked 60 miles to find, not London. Not the workshops or the wages or even the chance at a master's position someday. Your own yard, your own apprentices sleeping in your own attic. Not any of those particular things, though you want them all. What you walked 60 miles to find was the moment when the thing that speaks first on your behalf is the thing you can actually control. The collar of your shirt is not something you can always control. The road takes it from you. Poverty takes it from you. Time and sweat and the plain reality of living in a body that needs washing takes it from you. And while it is gone, while the collar is the colour of the road rather than the colour of linen, you are legible to strangers in ways you did not choose and cannot defend against. They look at you and see the wrong thing. They see the risk. They see the problem. They do not see the chisel edge. They do not see the mortise cut by eye. They see a dirty collar, and they make their calculation and they say the barn is full. But now you know this. You know what the collar says. You know what's living in it when you don't look. You know what the road does and how quickly it does it and what it takes to undo. You know it, and knowing it is a kind of power that you did not have 6 weeks ago. Not a large power, not the power of money or connections or birth, just the small specific power of knowing what's happening and doing something about it rather than wearing it, and wondering why doors keep closing. The stable is dark. The horse in the nearest stall is breathing with a deep, slow rhythm, an anchor sound, steady and mindless and warm. Outside, Southwark does what Southwark does at night, which is considerably more than Aldwych does. Voices and carts and the distant sound of music from somewhere. A single stringed instrument playing something that is identifiable as a tune without being identifiable as a specific one. London. You are in London. You made it. Your shoulder blades itch faintly, the ghost of the louse work. The skin still remembering what lived there for 2 weeks and is now gone. You don't scratch it. You let the itch sit there and fade on its own, which it does, slowly, over the next several minutes, like a sound dying away at the edge of hearing. Let it go. Let the road stay on the road. Let the shirt be what it is tomorrow, which is clean linen, which is your mother's work, which is the thing she handed you folded and pressed flat. Let it say what it should say. Let it say, here is a carpenter who respects his work and himself and the tools he carries and the trade his father taught him. Let it say, here is a man who is making his way. You close your eyes. The horse breathes. The city breathes. Further out, larger, slower. The breathing of a thing that has been breathing for 1,000 years and will breathe for 1,000 more. You breathe with it. Tomorrow at first light you'll get up and check the collar in the grey morning and it will be right. It will be as clean as you can make it, and you will lace your tunic over it and lift your bundle and walk to Roger Tanner's yard, and the work will begin, and you are good at the work. You know you are good at the work. It is the only thing you are certain of on this whole long road, and for now, for tonight, that certainty is enough. Warm enough, fed enough, clean enough. You arrived. Your eyes are heavy. The day has been long the way that good days are long, the kind of long that has weight to it, that you can measure in things done rather than just hours past. The wheelwright's key, the bridge, the smell of London, Roger Tanner's extended hand, the bathhouse and the soap and the shirt drying against your skin. These things happened today. They happened to you. Tomorrow something else will happen. You don't know what. You can't know. The future is a closed room, and you are on this side of the door with your tools in your hands ready to start, and the door is still shut, and that is fine. That is exactly how it should be. Because the value is not in knowing what's on the other side. The value is in being the kind of person who knocks. The horse shifts weight. Straw rustles. Somewhere in the city that single string instrument plays its indeterminate tune, fading and fading. The shirt dries. The collar is clean. You are asleep. And centuries from now, in a bed softer than anything you could imagine, in a room lit by no fire and no candle but by something else entirely, someone is hearing this. Someone is lying still in the dark with the small weight of their own day on them, their own version of the road, their own collar that sometimes says the wrong thing to the wrong person at the wrong moment, their own shirt carrying the evidence of what the week has cost them. They are warm, they are safe. The particular terrors of their night are not yours. No footpads, no rain, no empty stomach, no louse in the collar. But the shape of it is not so different. The body still tires. The road still takes. The question of who gets to decide what your collar says about you is still not fully answered. Some things have changed. Many things have not. The body that needs washing is the same body. The shirt that carries the road is the same shirt. And the relief of lying down, finally, in a place safe enough to close your eyes, that relief has not changed at all. Not in 650 years, not in 6,000. It is the oldest relief there is. Let it come now. Let the weight of your own day settle through you and into the surface beneath you. Let your shoulders drop. Let the sound of your own breathing fill the space where thought was. Let the muscles that have been holding everything together all day, every day, doing the work of holding you upright and moving and present in the world, let them remember that they can rest. That rest is allowed, that the next moment will come whether or not you're awake to meet it. Thomas Ware slept in a Suffolk stable on the 23rd of July, in the year 1372, with a clean shirt and 4 miles of blisters and something that felt like hope, and was asleep before the next bell. You can do the same. Let the city breathe without you for a few hours. It doesn't need your attention right now. Nothing does. Nothing that matters cannot wait until morning. Warm enough, safe enough, still enough. Let go. Let sleep take you the way it took Thomas, in the good dark, in the quiet after the road. Your breathing slows. The sounds outside go further away, and further still. And then they're just the sound of a world going on without you, which is the most peaceful thing there is, when you let it be, when you stop listening for the danger in it, and let it just be sound, just the sound of life happening at a comfortable distance while you rest. The shirt is clean. You made it. Good night. The morning comes at you in stages. First the horse shifting and stamping in the next stall, the specific sound of a large animal reminding itself that it has legs and opinions about being stationary. Then the light, which arrives through gaps in the stable boards in thin bars that cross the straw floor, and your own arm, and the face of the bundle you've been using as a pillow. Then the smell, which is stable smell, hay and horse, and the particular damp warmth of an enclosed space that has been occupied by large animals and one carpenter all night. You lie still for a moment and take stock. Your back aches from the boards under the straw. Your feet, when you flex them inside your boots, report the accumulated history of 60 miles in language that is specific and detailed and mostly unflattering. The marks on your skin are still there, the louse bites scattered across your ribs and back, but they are quieter this morning than they've been in a week. Not gone, but quieter. You reach up and touch the collar of the shirt, dry, stiff in the way of clean linen dried overnight, which is a different stiffness than the stiffness of sweat-dried linen and comes apart differently when you move, gives rather than resists. You check it in the bar of morning light crossing your chest. The colour is right. You get up. Roger Tanner's yard is already working when you arrive. This tells you something about the man, that he starts before the day has finished arriving, that the work begins when the light is good enough and not a moment later, that the men in his employ understand this or find employment elsewhere. 2 of the 3 from yesterday are already at the timber, and a third man you didn't see yesterday is doing something to a beam with the draw knife. Long, smooth strokes, curls of pale wood falling to the ground around his feet. Roger Tanner himself is standing at a sawhorse with a drawing on paper, which is unusual enough that you look at it twice. Most master carpenters work from drawings scratched in chalk on the floor, or from dimensions held in the head, or from a combination of memory and experience and the ability to look at a space and know what it needs. A man with paper drawings is a man working at a scale that requires coordination, that requires the ability to send someone to the other end of the site with instructions that are exact rather than approximate. He looks up when you come through the gate. He looks at your collar. A brief thing, a confirmation rather than an assessment. Something passes across his face that might be approval. or might simply be the absence of the slight tightening that was there yesterday. Either way, it is different from yesterday. Thomas Ware, he says. Not a question. Yes, sir. There's a stack of elm in the back. I need a dozen window frames, mortise and tenon, haunched on the horizontal half-inch reveal. The window openings are in the plans. He gestures at the paper. You can read plans. My father used them, you say. I've read his. Come look. You come and look. The plans are drawn in brown ink on paper that has been reinforced with a backing of linen. The kind of drawing that gets carried to sites and unrolled on sawhorses and consulted in all weathers and needs to survive this treatment. The drawings are clear. The window openings marked with their dimensions in Roman numerals, the reveal and the rabbet and the tenon dimensions marked with a precision that tells you Roger Tanner has been burned before by apprentices who assumed. How long for one frame? He asks. You look at the dimensions. You look at the elm stack visible at the back of the yard and calculate the working quality of the wood from this distance. It has been seasoning a while, stacked properly, which means it will be stable, which means it will cut clean. 2 hours, maybe a little less, you say. If the wood is as good as it looks, he nods. He doesn't say whether that's the right answer or the wrong one. He goes back to his drawing. You go to the elm is good. Better than you said, actually. 3 years of proper stacking and the wood has given up its movement, has made its peace with its new shape, and when your chisel goes into the first test cut at the end of a plank, the wood parts with a sound and a resistance that tells you immediately that this will be a pleasure rather than a fight. Good elm cuts like cooled butter. It is not the easiest wood. The grain is interlocked. It wants to split in unexpected directions if you push it wrong. But when you understand it, when you have the measure of the grain, and you follow rather than force, it moves for you. You set up your sawhorse. You mark the wood with your marking gauge, which is a small tool, a flat piece of wood with a marking pin and a fence that slides and locks. Nothing complicated but yours, your father's before yours, made by his father. The fence worn smooth where 3 generations of hands have gripped it. You mark the dimensions from the plan. You saw to the line. The sound of the saw on elm in the morning, in a yard where other men are working, is one of the good sounds of the world. It has a rhythm, the long push and pull, the sawdust falling in a fine pale line, the wood opening under the blade. It is the sound of things being made. By mid-morning you have 3 frames done. Roger Tanner comes to look at them without being invited. He picks up one of the frames and turns it in his hands, looking at the joints. He checks the mortise, putting his finger into the opening and feeling the walls, and then he checks the tenon on the mating piece, and then he fits them together dry, without glue to check the fit. It should be tight without being impossible, should require hand pressure to close and resist pulling apart without the peg that will lock it. He fits them, he pulls them, he turns the frame, checking the reveal on both faces. He puts it down. Good, he says. It is a single word with no ornamentation but with the weight of a man who uses it sparingly. He goes back to his work. You go back to yours. This is how 3 days pass in Roger Tanner's yard. You work. He occasionally comes to look. You make 12 window frames and 2 interior door frames, and a section of decorative moulding that he asked for on the 2nd day, which is the kind of work that separates the joiners from the rough carpenters. The ability to run a clean, consistent profile with a plane and a scratch stock, to produce a shape that is both geometrically exact and visually pleasing, that catches the light in the way the client is paying for. On the 3rd evening, As the light is going and the men are covering the work with canvas against the night dew, Roger Tanner calls you over. "Your father," he says. "Good carpenter?" "Very good," you say. "He mostly worked the churches in Sussex. The carved work, mostly." "Your letters? Better than most, the priest taught me." He's quiet for a moment, looking at the canvas-covered frames. "I've got a position," he says. "Journeyman wage, 6pence a day, room in the house, 2 meals." He looks at you. "The room is a room, not a stable." "That's fair," you say. "More than fair. I'm not a generous man. I'm a precise one. You do precise work, you get precise pay. You do imprecise work, you find precise employment elsewhere." He turns to look at you fully. "The house job on the Strand will take 6 months. After that, I've got a merchant's counting house in the city. Probably another 4 months of finish work. That's 10 months of steady work if you're here when each job starts. 10 months of steady work at 6pence a day is more money than you've ever contemplated at one time." "I'll be here," you say. He nods. "Good. Start Monday." He pauses. "And the laundress on Clink Street does weekly work for my men. Shirt, small clothes, stockings, all in together. Cost you a penny a week. I take it out of your wages." He walks away without waiting for your agreement, which is its own kind of clarity. It is not a suggestion. It is the terms. You stand in the yard in the fading light with the canvas-covered frames around you, and the smell of elm shaving still in your nose, and the city making its evening sounds over the yard wall, and you think, a penny a week. A penny every week for the shirt to go to the laundress on Clink Street, to come back clean, to go back on your body without ceremony, without the 2 weeks of building damage before the decision, without the bathhouse crisis and the road reading the collar and the doors that kept closing. A penny a week! As a built-in cost of the job, as a condition of employment as certain as the starting time and the 6pence wage. Roger Tanner, who is 50 years old and has been employing young men from the road for 20 of those years, understands something about the shirt that you've spent 6 weeks learning. He understands it not as a moral question, but as a practical one. A man whose shirt is dirty makes a poor representative of your workshop at a client's house. A man with a dirty collar on the Strand in the presence of merchants and their wives reflects on the quality of the work you're billing them for. Cleanliness is not a virtue in Roger Tanner's ledger. It is a line item. You follow his retreating back with your eyes. You think about your mother handing you the shirt, folded, pressed flat. Keep it clean. Yes, you think. Yes. Now I understand what you meant. Clink Street, where the laundress works, is 2 streets from Roger Tanner's house, which is itself a building of some substance. 3 stories, stone ground floor, timber and plaster above, with a workshop behind and a yard where the timber seasons and the tools are kept in a locked chest. The house is warm in a way you haven't experienced since Aldwick. Warm from the kitchen fire that burns from early morning, warm from the bodies of the 4 other people who live there. Roger Tanner and his wife Margaret, his journeyman of 3 years standing named Edward, who has a room on the 2nd floor, and a boy of about 12 named Will, who is in the 1st year of his apprenticeship and sleeps in the kitchen, which is the warmest place and also the most available. Your room is on the 2nd floor, opposite Edward's. It is small, a bed, a chest for your tools, a peg on the wall for your coat. The bed has a straw mattress under a wool mattress, which is a luxury you lie down on the first night with something approaching reverence. The window looks onto the yard. In the morning the first sound is the yard. The timber, the tools, the men arriving. This is enough, more than enough. This is the thing you walked 60 miles toward. The shirt goes to the laundress on Clink Street every Monday morning, with whatever else needs going. Stockings, the linen cloth you use to wipe your hands at meals, occasionally the wool cap if it's had a hard week. It comes back Thursday or Friday, folded, clean, smelling of nothing, or of the faint ghost of whatever she washes it with. You put it on, and it sits against your skin with the specific integrity of clean linen, and you don't think about it, which is the whole point. Not thinking about the shirt is the luxury. The collar that doesn't declare anything except that it is clean. The absence of the road. The absence of what lives in the seams when you don't attend to them. You work on the Strand house through August and September. The work is interior finish, which is the best kind. The house is structurally complete. The masons and the rough carpenters and the plasterers have had their months with it, and now it is yours. The detail work, the work that determines whether a room is merely adequate or is actually beautiful. You fit the window frames you made. You make the interior doors. You panel a section of wall in the main hall that will eventually be painted and gilded and will look like something quite different from the elm boards you're shaping now, but that you know, and Roger Tanner knows, will be straight and flat and true underneath whatever decoration covers it, because the decoration does not hold itself up, and the quality of what's behind it matters whether the painter cares or not. The merchant whose house it is, a cloth merchant named Geoffrey Alderton, which strikes you as interesting given that cloth is what you were using as your social currency all the way up the road, comes to inspect the work twice. Both times he brings his wife. She is a small, decisive woman with very good clothes and the manner of someone who knows exactly what she's paying for and expects to receive exactly that. She walks through the rooms saying very little. She runs her hand along the panelling you've fitted, checking for gaps and proud edges. She opens and closes the doors, testing the hang. She looks at the window frames from both inside and outside, checking whether the reveals are even, whether the light catches them the way they should. She says to her husband, not to you, "This is good work." Geoffrey Alderton nods and says nothing, and the inspection is over. Roger Tanner, who has been present and silent throughout, catches your eye afterward. His expression doesn't change, but he nods once, the specific nod that means, you see how this works, you see. You're building a reputation that belongs to Roger Tanner's workshop, and that will eventually, if things continue this way, begin to belong to your name too, Thomas Ware, the joiner who fitted the Alderton panelling, the man who did the Strand House windows, the craftsman who, years from now if you earn it, has his own list of clients who ask for him specifically, who trust the quality of his work because they have seen it in someone else's house and asked who made it. This is how it works. This is the long, slow mathematics of a craft reputation. It does not belong to the shirt exactly, but the shirt is part of it. The way you present yourself on the site, in front of the client, in the rooms of houses where other people will eventually live, and where the work you leave behind will speak for you after you're gone, this is part of the same thing. You are, without exactly planning it, becoming the kind of person who understands this. The laundress on Clink Street is a woman named Agnes. She's maybe 35, which makes her seem old to you, although you will later understand she's at the height of her working life. A woman who has run her washing operation since she was widowed at 28 by the 1369 plague, which took her husband and one of her 2 children and left her with a trade skill and a need to feed herself and her surviving daughter by whatever means came to hand. She washed clothes before. Now she washes clothes for everyone she can find who will pay her, which includes Roger Tanner's men and the workshop down the street and a couple of the inns and a canon from the Church of St. Mary Overy, who brings his vestments wrapped in linen and leaves them without speaking. She is not what you expected from the transaction of leaving your shirt with her. You expected a service, anonymous and regular, the way you expect the bakehouse to have bread in the morning. What you find is a person, a small, efficient person who has very organised opinions about laundry and an unsentimental approach to everything, and who, this becomes clear over weeks and then months, knows a great deal about the people whose clothes she washes. Not gossip. She doesn't gossip. But she knows things. She knows which of Roger Tanner's men are rough on their tools because she can see the marks the work leaves on their hands translated through the garments. Blood from a chisel slip, pitch from caulking work, the specific dark staining of certain woods. She knows which men are drinking heavily because she can smell it in the fabric, even after washing it out. Knows it not from the smell that alcohol leaves, but from the smell that habitual heavy drinking leaves on a body over time. Something deeper in the skin. She knows which men are eating well and which are spending their wages on something other than food, because the bodies those shirts belong to are either filling the fabric out properly or beginning to hang loose in it. She knows things about Thomas Ware that Thomas Ware has not told anyone. "You've been working hard," she says one Thursday, handing him back the folded shirt. She says it the way she says everything, factually, without editorializing. "The Strand job," he says. "Physical work, not just finish work. The shirt's losing more at the elbows than it should for joinery." She turns it to show him. The fabric at the elbow is thinner than the rest, the weave more open. Where from kneeling, from crawling under beams, from the contact with rough timber frames that fine finish work doesn't usually involve. "We've had to do some of the framing repairs ourselves," he says. "The carpenter before us left some things." She tucks the shirt into his bundle. "Bring it Monday with the others. I'll reinforce those elbows before they go." She does. She patches them from inside with a square of linen and small neat stitches that he would have been ashamed to produce himself, tight and regular. He only notices because the shirt sits slightly differently at the elbows for a day or two before it softens with wearing, and because when he looks, he can see her work, invisible from outside but there, holding the worn place together against further wear. He does not thank her specifically. He pays the penny on Monday and she nods. The transaction is the thanks. But he thinks about it. He thinks about the way she reads the shirt, the way his mother read the fabric she was making the shirt from, looking for flaws. There is a kind of attention in this, a knowledge that accumulates through handling a thing repeatedly, through washing and mending and pressing and folding. That is different from the knowledge that comes from wearing the thing. She knows the shirt from the outside. He knows it from the inside. Between them they have a complete picture of what the garment is doing, what it costs, what it needs. Edward, the journeyman of 3 years, is not someone Thomas immediately likes. Edward is a Londoner, born in the city, trained here, who has never been anywhere else and carries himself with the particular confidence of a man who knows he's in the right place. He is a good carpenter, technically very good, with the kind of speed that comes from years in a productive workshop, from having done the same operations hundreds of times in exactly the same workshop with exactly the same tools. He cuts fast and mostly clean and finishes quickly. What he doesn't have is the patience for the detail work. He can make a door frame faster than Thomas, but the fit is never quite as exact. The reveals vary by a fraction, where Thomas's don't vary at all. The moulding he runs with a plane has tiny wobbles you'd only catch in raking light, but that are there, the small evidence of attention not quite full. Roger Tanner knows this. He assigns accordingly. Edward does the work that requires speed and doesn't require perfect alignment. Thomas does the work that requires perfect alignment. The workshop functions well because both kinds of work exist in the right proportions. What Edward has that Thomas lacks is the city. He knows it. He knows it the way you know a house you grew up in your body, with the ease of someone who has never had to think about where anything is. He navigates Southwark and the bridge and the city proper, with the loose, comfortable stride of someone who is never lost, and he occasionally takes Thomas through it in the evenings, when the work is done and supper is past, and there are hours before sleep that want filling. It is on one of these evenings, 3 weeks into Thomas's employment, that Thomas sees the thing that is the other side of the shirt, the thing that happens when you don't find the laundress. They are walking along the south bank, east of the bridge, in the neighbourhood that runs between the river and the long irregular line of the Borough High Street. This is not the respectable part of Southwark. Southwark has a respectable part, around the Priory, around the better inns, around Roger Tanner's Street. But this part is something else. The buildings here are lower, older, leaning against each other like exhausted people. The street is mud, and has been mud for so long it has formed ruts of geological permanence. The sounds coming from the buildings are the sounds of many people in close proximity without enough space for either comfort or privacy. Stew Lane, Edward says, not with pride but not with apology either, simply naming it. The big one's the Cardinal's cap, and there's the Bell, which is cheaper but worse. He is speaking of the inns, the drinking establishments, the establishments that have, by common knowledge if not official designation, more to offer than drinking. Thomas nods. He has heard of these. He has heard that the South Bank is where the city's entertainments cluster, the ones that the city proper's regulations and the church's moral authority push to the edges and across the river. He has heard it described as vice, as sin, as simply commerce of the horizontal rather than the vertical. What he has not heard described is what it smells like, or what it looks like in the dark, or the specific quality of the people moving in and out of the buildings in the evening hour. There is a man sitting on the steps of the building called the Cardinal's Cap. He is sitting with his back against the door frame and his legs out in front of him, and he is not drunk, or not only drunk. He has the specific quality of a man who is ill. Thomas knows the look of illness. His younger brother had the sweating sickness when he was 7 and recovered, and Thomas has not forgotten the look of him in the worst of it. The bright glassy eyes, the stillness that is not rest. The way the skin takes on a particular quality, as though the heat of the fever is very slightly illuminating it from inside. This man has that quality. He is not young, maybe 40. Hard to tell. The life he's been living has been depositing its history in his face the way road deposits history in a shirt collar. His clothes are the clothes of someone who has been wearing them for a very long time. The shirt visible above his coat's collar is the colour of old stone, not the warm tan of Thomas's collar in week 3 of the road. Darker than that. The colour that comes after the tan when the accumulated content of the fabric has changed the fibre itself. The collar is stiff. You can see from 10 feet away that it does not move the way linen moves when it is clean. He is scratching, not his collar, his sides. Under his coat with a compulsiveness that tells you the itch is not the casual itch of a passing annoyance, but the sustained itch of something that has been present for weeks. Something that lives there. Thomas slows down. Don't, says Edward quietly. He's sick, Thomas says. He's always sick, Edward says, and he says it with a flatness that is not cruelty, but is the flatness of someone who has seen this enough times that it has become a category rather than an individual. He's been on the step most nights this month. He sleeps in the alley. He drinks when he can earn enough to drink, which is less and less. What's wrong with him? Edward looks at him. What do you think? He says. Thomas looks at the man, at the glassy eyes, at the colour of the skin, at the way the man is scratching with the fixed compulsiveness of someone who cannot stop. The fever, Thomas says. Edward nods. Jail fever, he says, or camp fever if you prefer. Whatever you call it, it comes after a certain kind of life. He gestures vaguely at the man, at the alley, at the whole geography of what they're looking at. Too long without a wash, too long in the same clothes. The lice get into everything, and then the fever comes, and once the fever comes, most people don't come back from it. Is he going to die? Thomas says. Edward looks at him with something that is not quite pity and not quite impatience. Yes, he says. Not necessarily this week, but yes. They walk on. Thomas looks back once. The man on the steps hasn't moved. He's still scratching. The glassy eyes are fixed on something in the middle distance that is not the street. This is what Thomas did not see in the bathhouse in Guildford, when he found the lice in the collar and calculated the problem and paid the laundress and solved it. He solved it. He had the money, barely, and he had the knowledge, barely, and he had the luck of a cart ride and a wheelwright's job and a merchant who gave him bread, and he solved it. He walked out of Guildford with a clean shirt and into Roger Tanner's yard with a clean shirt, and here he is now, 3 weeks into a steady position with a roof and sixpence a day, and the laundress on Clink Street taking his shirt every Monday. The man on the Cardinal's Cap steps did not have the cart ride, did not have the wheelwright, did not have the bread, didn't have the 3 pence for the bathhouse and the laundress's penny and the 2 days of sun on the riverbank, did not have, at some critical junction on his own road, the equivalent of whatever it was that kept Thomas moving in the right direction, when the wrong direction was also available. And here he is, on the steps, with the fever coming. This is the hidden consequence. Not just the itch and the collar and the jobs refused and the barns that are suddenly full. This is what waits at the end of the road when the itch is not addressed. Not because the man on the steps is slothful or sinful or careless, but because the road is long and the money is not always there and the bathhouse costs a penny and sometimes you don't have a penny. The fever that the priests call the judgment of God and the physicians call the miasma, and nobody in 1372 England calls typhus because that name does not yet exist. That fever lives in the louse feces on the skin. It enters through the scratch. It incubates for 1 to 2 weeks, which is exactly long enough for you to feel fine and infect other people before you know you have it. And when it arrives with violence. Sudden high fever, the worst headache you've ever had, a rash that spreads from the trunk outward, confusion that deepens until the world makes no sense, and then either a slow recovery that takes weeks and leaves you weak as water, or the organ failure that ends it. The man on the Cardinal's Cap steps is 2 weeks into something Thomas can identify now, having lived a smaller version of the same thing on the road, and does not know how to feel about being able to identify it. He knows how to feel about the distance between himself and the steps. He knows the distance is mostly luck. The cart ride, the halfpenny for the laundress, the wheelwright's job, Agnes's Tuesday mending and Monday pickup, and the penny that comes out of his wages with the certainty of a mechanical thing. He knows the distance is not virtue. He files this knowledge away in the part of his mind where important things go, the part that his father built by telling him things, and his mother built by showing him things, and the road added to by being itself long and specific and uninterested in his feelings about it. October comes and the Strand House is finished, or nearly finished. The final painting and gilding is someone else's work, and the hardware is someone else's work, and Roger Tanner's workshop hands over the interior in a state that is clean and sound and precise, and goes to the next job. The counting house in the city proper, on a street near Cheapside, is a different kind of building for a different kind of client. Geoffrey Alderton was a cloth merchant with a merchant's values: quality, durability, the thing that would last. The client for the counting house is a lawyer named Robert Moat, who wants the counting house to say things that a lawyer's counting house should say: stability, formality, the weight of authority expressed in wood and plaster. He wants a panelled room, a good floor, doors that open without sound and close without force. He wants the specific language of serious money. Roger Tanner gives him Thomas for the panelled room. The panelled room in a lawyer's counting house in 1372. London is not decorated in the way of a great hall. It is not carved, not gilded, not painted with the expensive pigments that the very rich use to show that they are very rich. It is plain, but it is plain in the way that precision is plain. Nothing wasted, nothing unnecessary, the wood chosen for its evenness of grain, and the joints cut to vanish when the panel is in place, the whole thing adding up to a surface that is simply itself, oak, flat and true, that says what it says without shouting. Thomas works on it through November and into December, which means working in cold. The building is partially heated by a brazier that Robert Moat's clerk tends with more dedication than the work around him seems to require, and the heat from the brazier reaches the corner of the room where Thomas is working in a way that is adequate but not generous, and his fingers are stiff in the mornings, and he has learned to warm them against the brazier for 20 minutes before doing anything that requires delicacy. He has also learned something from Agnes about cold weather and the shirt. Cold weather changes the shirt's behaviour. In summer, the sweat saturates the fabric quickly, and the shirt becomes damp and then dry and then damp again in a cycle that deposits its evidence rapidly. In winter, you sweat less, which is a mercy, but you wear more layers, and the layers trap the body's warmth against the shirt and create their own microclimate against the skin that is warm and still and protected from the cold air outside. This microclimate is, as it turns out, exactly the conditions that the louse population finds most hospitable. The lice don't die in winter. They do not go dormant. They are, if anything, more active in winter because the layered clothing creates a more stable temperature environment for them. This is a thing Thomas has worked out from observation rather than theory. The men in the workshop who let their shirt go longer than a week between washings in December get itchier faster than they did in July, which seems backwards until you understand the physics. The Monday routine with Agnes continues through the cold. She adds, without comment, a small sachet of dried herbs to each bundle when it comes back, wormwood and pennyroyal, and something she doesn't name, tied in a scrap of linen and tucked between the shirt and the stockings. The herbs smell powerfully, astringently, with a sharpness that clears the sinuses. She says nothing about them. He says nothing about them. He tucks the sachet into the chest with the clean clothes, and the sachet is there until the next Monday when the bundle goes back. He looks it up, eventually in a book. Roger Tanner has 2 books in his house, both in Latin, which Thomas can read well enough to navigate. One is a carpenter's manual, geometrical constructions, proportional systems, the mathematics of arches and beams. The other is a household manual, the kind of general reference that a literate household of the period might have, covering medicine, cookery, farming, and the management of various domestic problems. Under the heading De Pediculis, concerning lice, the manual is specific. It recommends a decoction of wormwood for lice in the hair. It recommends pennyroyal oil applied to the clothing for lice in the body linen. It recommends frequent washing of the body and the frequent changing of linen. It notes, as a practical observation rather than a theological one, that those who travel extensively are more susceptible, and that this susceptibility is connected to the difficulty of maintaining the washing regimen on the road. It does not know why pennyroyal works. It simply knows that it does, or seems to. The mechanism, the specific chemistry of pulegone, the compound in pennyroyal that is toxic to insects, will not be understood for several more centuries. But Agnes knows, through the accumulated practical knowledge of women who have been managing linen for as long as linen has existed, that the herb in the bundle helps, that it keeps the problem from re-establishing itself between washings, that it is a maintenance measure rather than a cure, a thing you do continuously to prevent the thing that happens when you stop. He thinks about this on a Tuesday evening in December, sitting in his room with a candle burning and the city making its winter sounds outside, quieter than summer, slower, the cold making everything slightly more deliberate. He is thinking about the herbs and the washing and the counting house panelling and the man on the cardinal's cap steps, and he is thinking about his mother's instruction, which he has now been keeping for 3 months, and which has cost him a penny a week, and given him in return a version of himself that is able to stand in a lawyer's panelled room and be seen for his work rather than his collar. Keep it clean. She knew. Of course she knew. She had laundered shirts her whole life. Her husband's and her son's, had done it at the river with the other women of the village, had dried them on the fence and pressed them flat with her palms. She knew exactly what happened when you didn't do this, and what it led to, and how fast it led there. She knew it the way Agnes knows it, and the way the author of Roger Tanner's household manual knows it, and the way the man on the steps outside the cardinal's cap learned it too late. She handed him the shirt and she gave him the instruction, and she did not explain it because the explanation was in the instruction. The instruction was, do not become the man on the steps. Do not become the man with the glassy eyes and the compulsive scratching and the fever coming. Do not become the collar that tells everyone you meet that you're past the point of managing things. Stay on this side of it, whatever it costs. A penny a week, a halfpenny at the bathhouse, 2 days on a riverbank in Guildford, whatever it costs. The window in his room is frosted at the corners. The frost makes patterns that are extraordinary, branching and precise, the cold's own geometry, and he looks at them in the candlelight and thinks that these patterns are as exact as the joints in the counting house panels, as exact as the reveals in the Strand House windows, and that the cold produced them without knowing it, without intention, the way water takes the shape of its container, effortlessly, inevitably, in accordance with rules that are not rules but simply what is. His breath makes a small cloud in the cold air of the room, even with the window closed. He pulls the blanket up. He thinks about Aldwych, where his mother will be doing exactly this at this exact hour, pulling the blanket up, settling the fire, the house becoming itself for the night. His brother, who is 2 years younger and still there, still helping with the farm work, will be doing the same. The door will be bolted. The well will be where it always was. He is here. Southwark, London. The panelled room in the counting house on Cheapside, and the 6 months of Strand House panelling behind him, and the letter to his mother that he's been writing slowly, a little at a time, in the margins of the days when there is light enough and time enough to write, describing everything he can describe with the words he has. He will finish the letter before Christmas. He will send it with the first carrier going south. She will read it. His mother reads. This is not common, and is one of the things her family did for her. Taught her to read with the same intention with which you sharpen a chisel, because it is useful, and the life is better with it than without. She will read it in the kitchen firelight, and he imagines her face doing the thing it does when she's reading carefully, slightly narrowed at the eyes, the lips occasionally moving. He is, by any measure he can apply, well. He is well and working, and the shirt is clean, and the laundress on Clink Street has the situation managed, and he is in London with a journeyman wage and a room and 2 meals a day, and what feels, for the first time since Aldwych, like the beginning of the thing he came here to build. This is not nothing. This is the point at which you have to notice that it is not nothing. Because the road makes it very easy to move from problem to problem without stopping to take stock of the fact that the problems are for now behind you. The problems are for now behind you. He closes his eyes. The shirt is in the chest, folded, clean. Agnes returned it on Friday. It'll go back Monday. This is the rhythm now, the reliable rhythm, and it will continue until something disrupts it, and things will disrupt it. The road is long, and disruption is the road's nature. But for now the rhythm holds. For now the rhythm holds, and that is sufficient. And he is tired in the good way, and the panelled room is half done, and he knows exactly how to finish it. And Roger Tanner said this morning, looking at the corner section, Moat will commission more work when he sees this, which is not praise exactly, but is the currency Roger Tanner uses instead, and it is enough. The frost on the window multiplies in the cold. He sleeps. Christmas comes to Southwark the way it comes to every place in England, with a great deal of cold and a modest amount of festivity, and the church bells working harder than usual, and the smell of something roasting from every prosperous kitchen, which on Tanner's Street means goose, which Margaret Tanner produces from the kitchen on Christmas afternoon, with the specific pride of a woman who has been planning this meal since November and executed it precisely. There is also bread and winter vegetables and a pudding, and a jug of something warm that Roger Tanner produces from the back of a cupboard without explanation. They eat at the table in the kitchen, all 5 of them, which is not the usual arrangement. Usually Roger and Margaret eat in the front room, and the workshop men eat in the kitchen with Will the apprentice. But Christmas is an exception, and Roger Tanner is a man who marks his exceptions deliberately. He says nothing sentimental at the table. He pours from the jug and he eats the goose, and he occasionally says something factual about the counting house job, which will resume in January, and he talks to Edward about a job that has come in for the spring, a new building going up in Bermondsey that needs all the joinery work. But when the meal is done and the plates are cleared, he pours one more cup from the jug, and he lifts it, and he looks at Thomas, and he says, "To good work." He says it simply. He says it the way he says good when the joints are right. Simply, with the weight that comes from being a man who does not say things he does not mean. To good work. You raise your cup. The jug is spiced wine, heavily spiced, the kind of thing that only gets made at Christmas, and it is warm in your hands and warm in your chest when you drink it, and outside the window the London winter is doing what London winter does, which is rain, cold and steady. And the kitchen fire is high, and the goose was excellent, and you are 19 years old, and you're in London, and you are well. You're warm enough, fed enough, positioned, for the moment, correctly. The shirt is in the chest upstairs, folded clean, waiting for Monday. Agnes will take it and return it. The seams your mother stitched will hold for years yet. The elbow she reinforced are sound. This is the shape of things now. You are inside the shape of things. January brings the counting house back, and the winter cold deepens to something that has actual teeth. A cold that gets into the stone of the building and makes the mortar sweat, and the wood contract in its joints, so that every morning the first hour is spent rechecking what seemed secure yesterday, and occasionally redriving a wedge where the wood has moved overnight. Cold is the carpenter's enemy in a way that heat is not. Wood moves in cold, shrinks and pulls away from its fixings, opens gaps in things you thought were settled. You learn this, you adapt. You start each morning with a full inspection before you start new work, and you log what has moved and what needs attention, and you develop the habit of leaving small allowances in critical joints, a fraction of a millimetre where the wood will want to pull, that makes your work perform better in cold than the work of carpenters who don't think about this. Roger Tanner notices. He comes one morning in February and watches you working through the inspection sequence, and then he says, "Who taught you to do that?" "Nobody," you say. "I worked it out." He's quiet for a moment. "Come with me on Thursday," he says. "There's a client in the city wants to talk about a house he's building in the spring. I want another pair of ears." You go on Thursday. The client is a wool merchant even more prosperous than Geoffrey Alderton, with a house currently under construction in a lane off Cheapside that will be, when finished, a statement about exactly how successful wool trading has been for the merchant of the particular merchant in question. He wants, as merchants of this period tend to want, things that look extremely good in the light that their money projects and that also do not fall apart, and that cost, if possible, somewhat less than his first impulse toward extravagance. Roger Tanner navigates this conversation with the ease of 20 years. He discusses quality. He discusses cost. He discusses the specific difference between what looks good at completion and what looks good in 5 years, which is a distinction that the best clients appreciate and the worst do not. He quotes, he counter-proposes, he produces, at a critical moment, a small piece of the oak moulding from the Strand house as a sample, a 3-inch piece he carries in his coat pocket for exactly these conversations. The merchant holds it. He runs his thumb along the profile. He holds it up to the window light. He looks at Thomas. "Is this your work?" he asks. You look at Roger Tanner. Roger Tanner gives nothing away. "Yes," you say. The merchant turns the piece in his hand. "Where are you from?" "Sussex," you say. "Aldwick, near Chichester." "Long way," he says. "Yes," you say. He nods, something settling in him, and hands the piece back to Roger Tanner and continues the negotiation. On the way back to Southwark, crossing the bridge in the February cold with the river running fast beneath them and the wind off the water cutting through every layer of clothing, Roger Tanner says, without looking at him, he's going to commission the work. "I thought he might," Thomas says. "He'll want you on the detail work," Roger Tanner says. He saw it in the piece. He says nothing more. They walk the rest of the bridge in silence into Southwark, into the streets that are familiar now, that Thomas can navigate without thought, that have stopped being the city and have become simply where he lives. The months pass, the spring job begins. The spring brings more light and warmth, and the city opening up from its winter contraction. The street markets fuller, the river traffic heavier, the apprentices working later into the evenings because the evenings have light to work in now. The counting house is finished and accepted by Robert Moat with a nod that, Edward assures Thomas, is the equivalent of a standing ovation from a man of Moat's disposition. The Cheapside house takes all summer. It is the most ambitious work Thomas has done. A full second story of interior joinery, the staircase, which is the centrepiece, designed in a spiral that has to be geometrically perfect, or the treads will be uneven and the client will notice every time he climbs it, which he will do several times a day for the rest of his life. A staircase is not a piece you can patch or apologise for. A staircase has to be right. Thomas spends 2 weeks on the layout drawings alone. He works them on paper first, which Roger Tanner raises an eyebrow at. Paper is expensive, this is a lot of paper. And then on chalk on the workshop floor, full scale, which is the traditional method but which Thomas does after the paper rather than instead of it. The paper lets him work out the geometry. The chalk floor lets him verify the geometry with his body, walking the spiral with a measuring rod, checking the rise and run of each tread. He gets it right. The staircase goes in over 3 weeks in August. A slow, precise installation that is the most demanding work he has ever done. And when it is complete, and he stands at the bottom and looks up the spiral and then walks up it, every tread even, the handrail smooth under his hand, the whole thing rising exactly as he designed it. He has a feeling that he has had once before in his life, cutting the mortise into the good elm on the first day at Roger Tanner's yard. It is the feeling of a thing being what it was supposed to be, the feeling of work that has arrived at its intended form. Roger Tanner goes up the stairs. He comes back down. He looks at Thomas. "This is the best work you've done," he says. Thomas nods. "It won't be the best work I do," he says. Roger Tanner smiles. It is a small smile, a brief thing, but it is there. He does not smile often. "No," he says, "it probably won't be." Autumn again. A year since Thomas arrived in Suffolk. A year of Mondays with Agnes and Tuesday sachet mending, and the shirt returning clean and going back dirty and returning clean. The cycle that makes the difference between the man in the cardinal's cap steps and the man with the staircase design on paper. He goes back to the cardinal's cap in September. Not to go inside. There's no reason to go inside the cardinal's cap, not for Thomas, not now. But because his way home from a material yard goes past it, and he is curious. The man who was on the steps in October last year is not there. He asks Edward that evening. Edward's face does the thing Thomas expected. "Died in January," he says. "In the alley. They found him in the morning." Thomas is quiet. "The fever?" he asks. "The fever," Edward says. Thomas eats his supper without speaking much, which is not unusual enough for anyone to remark on. He's thinking about January, about the cold, about the frost patterns on his bedroom window. In January, while Thomas was redriving wedges in a cold counting house, and checking the tolerance of his joints, and eating Margaret Tanner's saltfish on Fridays, and sending his shirt to Agnes every Monday. In January, in the alley behind the cardinal's cap, a man whose name Thomas never knew died of a fever that came from his shirt, not metaphorically, not as punishment or as judgment. Simply, the fever came from the lice in the shirt, which came from the road, which came from however it came to pass that a man ended up sleeping in an alley in Southwark in the autumn with nowhere to wash and nothing to wash with. Thomas thinks about the gap between himself and that alley. He thinks about the cart ride to Guildford, the bread from William, the wool merchant, the halfpenny for the laundress. He thinks, it was not virtue that put me in Roger Tanner's yard. It was a series of very small things that could each have gone differently, and that, if they had gone differently, might have ended at a different destination. He files this thought away. He does not dramatize it. He does not carry it as guilt, which would be the wrong shape for it, or as pride in his own good sense, which would be a misreading. He carries it as information, as the kind of information that changes how you look at the man on the step next time, and the time after that. There will be other men on steps. London is full of steps, and London is full of men who end up on them, at the end of roads that started somewhere reasonable, and went somewhere else through a sequence of individually comprehensible events. Thomas Ware will walk past many of them in the years he is in Suffolk, and he will not be able to help most of them because that is not how things work. But he will not look at them the way the priest at home looked at the beggar, as the embodiment of a spiritual failure, and he will not look at them the way Roger Tanner's yard looked at them through the gate it kept closed. He will look at them as men who did not have the cart ride. The year turns. The September evenings shorten. The September shirt goes to Agnes on Monday and returns on Thursday folded and faintly herbed and clean and ready for Monday again. This is the rhythm. This is the maintenance of a thing. A chisel sharpened before it gets dull. A joint checked before it opens. A shirt washed before the road writes itself permanently into the fabric. Thomas sits in his room on a September evening with a candle burning and the window showing the yard below, and his tools in the chest and the shirt on the peg, and the drawings for the next job on the table, which is a church restoration in Bermondsey, which Roger Tanner won the tender for last week and which starts in the spring, which means it will see Thomas through another year and into the one after that and after that, longer and further than he could see, from the Aldwych Road, with the bundle on his back and the letter in his pocket and 60 miles between him and the place he was trying to get to. He is 19. He will be 20 in December. He's a journeyman carpenter in Roger Tanner's workshop in Southwark, London, and the staircase in the merchant's house on the lane off Cheapside is the best work he has done, and it will not be the best work he does. He thinks about his mother, about the shirt folded and pressed flat and her hands on it. He will write a letter tonight. He will describe the staircase. He'll describe the frost on the window, and Agnes on Clink Street, and Roger Tanner's nod that says good, and Edward's Londonese, and the view from London Bridge when the tide is right, and the ships are coming in from the estuary, and you can see the masts above the rooftops like a second city of wood and sailcloth floating over the first. He will write, "The shirt is well. I take it to a laundress every Monday. There is a woman here who reinforces the elbows when they wear. You would approve of her work." He will write, "I kept it clean." He dips the pen. He begins. Outside, Southwark does what Southwark does in September. The slow evening wind off the river, the smell of low tide mud and coal smoke, the sound of the city settling into itself for the night, the specific quality of a large place breathing out after a day of breathing in. A cart passes in the street below, its wheels finding every rut. A dog barks and is answered and then is quiet. A church bell somewhere, St. Mary Overy probably the nearest, and strikes the hour. Thomas writes, "The candle burns down, the shirt is on the peg, the shirt is clean. Outside, the night deepens over London, over the river and the bridge and the Strand and Cheapside and the staircase in its merchant's house that rises in a perfect spiral that Thomas Ware built from a geometry he worked out himself in chalk on a workshop floor over all of it. The same night that goes over every city and every road and every barn and every alley, equal over all of it. The only thing in the world that is genuinely equal over all of it. He puts the pen down. He reads what he's written. He folds the paper. He sets it on the chest where he won't forget it in the morning, where it will be ready for the carrier. He looks at the shirt on the peg. He thinks, 60 miles, 6 weeks. A cart ride and a halfpenny and a woman who opened the seam and showed him what was inside. He thinks, it was such a small thing. He thinks, all the things that matter are small things mostly. The chisel edge maintained, the joint cut right, the seam examined, the shirt sent on Monday. The small things done consistently are the shape of a life, not the dramatic things, not the staircase, though the staircase is real and good and will be there after he is not, but the Monday shirt and the weekly inspection, and the penny that comes out of the wages with the certainty of a thing decided. His eyes are tired. The candle is low. He's been awake for a long time today, since before the light, since the yard sounds came up through the window, while he was still in the last layer of sleep, and he lay there for a moment, exactly as he lay in the Guildford stable nearly a year ago, in the grey pre-dawn taking stock. His arms, his legs, the particular places where the work of yesterday has left itself, the overall assessment, tired and capable, ready for tomorrow. He gets into the bed, he pulls the blanket up. The candle gutters once and holds. He lies on his back and looks at the ceiling, which is dark, and lets the sounds of the city do what they do at this hour, which is slow and quiet, and eventually becomes something he is no longer tracking consciously, but simply receiving, the way you receive rain without processing every drop individually. Somewhere across the river, someone is still awake. Many someones. London does not sleep entirely. This is something he knows now. The bakers are working through the night, and the night watchmen are walking their rounds, and the river traffic never fully stops, and somewhere in the alleys of the South Bank there are people for whom night is simply the time when the city's attention is elsewhere, a window of activity rather than rest. But in this room, in this bed tonight, it is rest. The long road from Aldwick to Southwark, the 60 miles and the 6 weeks and the cart ride and the bathhouse and the elm yard and the mortice and tenon and the staircase and the spiral, the laundress's Monday and the herb sachet and the collar that speaks now for rather than against. All of it brought here, to this room, to this moment. The candle goes out. The dark is soft. You are warm. You're where you were trying to get to. The shirt is clean, and the work is good, and tomorrow the yard opens at first light, and you will be there, chisel sharp, marking gauge set. The drawings in your head and on paper both ready. But that is tomorrow. Tonight is tonight. Let the city breathe without you. Let the river run in the dark below the bridge where you crossed a year ago with your bundle and your letter and the shirt that needed a laundress and the 60 miles settling into your legs like debt repaid. Let it all settle. The sounds grow farther away, or you grow farther from the sounds, the same thing from the inside. And now, here, on this side of the ears between Thomas Ware's London and wherever you are tonight, there is a stillness that belongs to both of you equally. You who are warm enough, you who are safe enough, you who have had your own version of the road, your own dirty collar, your own thing, You couldn't help that others read wrong. Your own cart ride and your own laundress and your own Monday that becomes a rhythm that becomes the maintenance of a life. You know what the shirt carries when you don't look. You know what it says when you can't control it. You know the distance between the managed and the unmanaged, the penny and the fever, the chip from the floor and the step outside the cardinal's cap. You know it is mostly luck and some attention, and the right sequence of small things maintained. Let that be enough for tonight. The body is tired in the good way. The work was done. The chisel was sharp enough, or sharp enough can be attended to in the morning, and the morning will come whether or not you stay awake to witness its approach. The morning will come. Let it come without you for a few more hours. Let the warmth of the blanket absorb the day. Let your shoulders release from the shape they hold all day, the shape of someone doing something, into the shape of someone at rest, which is a different shape entirely, softer, wider, the shoulders back and down and the chest open and the breath coming and going without effort. Like that, just like that, slow, slower. The frost will come before morning, probably. The window will show its geometry by first light, the cold's own precision, branching patterns that are more exact than anything Thomas has drawn on paper, or Agnes has stitched in linen, or Roger Tanner has said in a single word that means more than a paragraph. But you won't see it happen. You'll just see it there in the morning, already made, the way the best things are already made when you find them. By something patient and consistent and without drama, by the accumulation of small exact forces applied over time, like water, like cold, like the wearing of roads into roads, like sleep, which comes for you now the way it came for Thomas Ware in the Southwark stable, and in the room above the yard after that, without drama, simply and with complete authority, the body claiming what the body requires. Let it claim you, warm, still, breathing. The sounds outside are the sounds of the world going on at comfortable distance, which is the most peaceful sound there is, the sound of everything continuing without your help for a little while. This shirt is clean, these seams are sound, the road is behind you. Good night.